Hi, Councillor Steinhoff Gray. Hi, Councillor Steinhoff Gray. Do you want to just turn on your mic, make sure we can hear you all right?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Thank you.
How was the water slide?
They're always a joy.
One minute to live, 1 minute. And you're live in 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and drop.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Kincardine, 5 o'clock on April 3rd, 2023 in the Council Chambers at the Municipal Administration Center. Roll call will begin with Deputy Mayor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Blackwell.
Present.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Present.
Councillor Kennedy.
Present.
Councillor Prenger.
Present.
Councillor Steinhoff Gray. She waved at us, okay, and Councillor Stewart.
Present.
I'd like to also comment that we have a number of staff here, as well as a substantial gathering in the hall this evening. I'd like to comment before we begin that each of us has a history formed by our own experiences and upon those of our ancestors, and for these we are very grateful. Part of the municipality of Kincardines history is that we are on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. The land on which we live has a historical story, as do the waters whose shores are close by. And we express our gratitude to the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, who in the past and present preserved the traditional lands while being an important part in building our community, our province, and our nation. It's our desire to learn and acknowledge this history, appreciate the contributions, and reconcile with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the Métis Nation of Ontario, and the historic Saugeen Métis. All right, are there any amendments, additions, or deletions to or from the council agenda? Any disclosures of pecuniary interest you can make now or as they arise during the meeting? And public forum, and I'd like to welcome Jana Lee Ibbotson to come forward. Jana has 3 minutes. She would like to speak on the Hike for Hospice from the Huron Shores Hospice in Tiverton. Jana Lee, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me tonight.
So my name is Jenna Lee Ibbotson, as Mayor Craig mentioned, and I am from Huron Shores Hospice. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator. I just want to talk a little bit about the hospice for those who may not know too much about it. Huron Shores Hospice is a charitable, not-for-profit, volunteer-driven, community-funded residential hospice, providing quality end-of-life care at no cost to residents of Kincardine, Huron-Kinloss, Saugeen Shores, and the surrounding areas. 100% of the funds raised to support Huron Shores Hospice remains in our community. Since opening our doors in 2018, Huron Shores Hospice has served 109 residents and their families at our suites in Tiverton Park Manor. More than half, about 60% of those residents resided in the municipality of Kincardine. We have also supported 85 people in our community as they work through their grief with our grief recovery program. We also host death cafes, helping people speak more freely about death and dying. We will also be offering end-of-life planning sessions starting in early summer as well. We currently receive approximately 1/3 of our operating budget through the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. Due to the challenge of keeping a small hospice in operation, our board has always planned ahead with 2 years running in the bank, so we can continue to deliver these valuable services free of charge for our community. Now, a little bit about the hike for those who have not participated. Our Hike for Hospice is one of 2 major fundraisers we host annually to help raise funds to keep our 2-suite hospice in service. We are so excited to be welcoming hikers back to the Davidson Center again this year. Our goal is to raise $45,000, and all the funds raised will help provide quality end-of-life care in our 2-bed hospice suite and support our community programs. Again, 100% of the funds we do raise stays in our community and will directly benefit the community members we serve. We have submitted a special events request to the municipality, and it has been granted permission for us to rent the space. And we invite you all to join us for our Hike for Hospice on Sunday, May 13th, 2023. The hike will kick off at 10 a.m. with registration opening at 9:30. This event will take place at the Davidson Center in Kincardine, and it is a rain or shine event, so come prepared. We also have activities for the kids and a barbecue lunch during the community celebration that will take place after the hike. I did provide Jennifer with some pledge forms that she can distribute to those who are interested, but we do also have an online form to register. You can go as a team if you want. How fun would that be, municipality team? You can join as a team or individuals, and for more information, you can always go to our website at HuronShoresHospice.ca. If you scroll down to the bottom, there is the event there, or you can contact myself again, and my name is Jenna Lee at HuronShoresHospice.ca. So thank you.
Jenna Lee, thank you so much. Speaking from a family with experience there, it is a well-needed and appreciated resource in our community. Thank you very much for presenting that. We move on to adoption of minutes from our regular and special meetings. Clerk, please.
This is moved by Andrea Clark, second by Rory Kavanaugh, that the minutes of the council meetings held on March 20th, 2023 be adopted as printed.
All in favor? Yes. No one opposed, that's carried. Are there any presentations or petitions? None this evening? All right. Motions and notice of motion. Clerk, please.
So this is moved by Amanda Steinhoff Gray, seconded by Doug Kennedy. Whereas section 357 and section 358 of the Municipal Act provides a process for property owners to apply for a cancellation, reduction, and refund of taxes under specific circumstances, including but not limited to a change in the use of property, demolition, or fire, property being substantially unusable for a period of at least 3 months, or a gross or manifest error in the preparation of the assessment roll. And whereas in the opinion of staff, the 2 write-offs, appeal number 2022-06 and 2022-07, meet the criteria set out in the Municipal Act. And whereas the total of the applications amounts to $1,578.33, with the municipal share being $893.46. Now therefore be it resolved that council approve the applications as provided.
You have heard the motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. And just for public notice, applicants, if there's anyone here and they would like to talk us out of it, refunding their money, or if there's anyone who would like to make application, applicants are always able to come and present to council their appeal, and it would be directed towards our capable clerk. She can figure it out. All right, 7.3, school bus stop arm cameras.
Moved by Beth Blackwell, seconded by Bill Stewart, that the Council of the Municipality of Kincardine support the Municipality of North Perth's resolution of March 6, 2023, urging the province to require all school buses to have stop arm cameras. And further, that a letter of support be sent to the Municipality of North Perth, Premier Doug Ford, Attorney General Doug Downey, Minister of Education Stephen Lecce, and Lisa Thompson, MPP.
You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Councillor Stewart, please.
Since we have a resident expert right in here, Krista, I think you're here. If we put cameras on these arms, would we be allowed to actually enforce it and actually, or would that take a provincial sort of type of bylaw or something like that? Because if you get a picture of a vehicle going past, how do we basically, could you enforce it with some sort of type of bill or anything, or some type of payment, or hang them up? I don't know.
Inspector Miller, would you like to come? If you would, please come to the podium. The question is, do we have to send out our bylaw enforcement officers, or would this be a jurisdiction other than ours that would enforce that?
Thank you, Councillor Stewart, for putting me on the spot. It's a good thing I'm quick on my feet. So stopping for a school bus does fall under the Highway Traffic Act. It is provincial legislation. So as long as the officers have proof of which a video, if it shows the actual license plate of the vehicle, they could follow up with the registered owner of that vehicle and proceed from there. I do know that there is currently a company out there that does get involved in partnerships with municipalities to fund stoplight legislation or stoplight legislation technology. Thank you.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I did to Councillor Stewart's question, I did a little research on this. One of them was a recent article that involved Thunder Bay entertaining this idea. And they ultimately, the municipal organization recommended they didn't do it. But as a result, I think Ottawa is one municipality in the province that does do this. And there's been some talk about how you administer this, is that the red light cameras and or speeds, I didn't know this, it was good to know. Speed sensors or something like that. There's actually a provincial body in or around the Toronto area that actually gets sent this information in terms of like violations and stuff like that, and could actually help process this. And one of the reasons I think why the North Perth resolution to have the province get involved, not only in funding the installation on the buses, but the administration of the whole program, it was related to that administrative part about how do you go from a picture off of a camera up to someplace that ultimately results in a fine being applied.
Heard the resolution. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. Consideration of bylaws. Clerk, please.
Moved by Jennifer Springer, seconded by Mike Hinchberger, that the Gray Bruce Woodturners lease agreement 2023 bylaw be deemed to be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed and numbered as bylaw 2023-043.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The Kincardine Artists lease agreement.
This is moved by Rory Kavanagh, seconded by Amanda Steinhoff Gray, and it's that the Kincardine Artists Inc. lease agreement 2023 bylaw be deemed to be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed and numbered as bylaw 2023-044.
Any discussion? Councillor Prenger, please.
I have two buttons on. There we go. Thank you. I believe it's section 1.6. Sorry, I don't have it open in front of me. I wasn't quick enough. Renewal. I believe the terms in there state that after these 2-year leases, we would go back to 5-year leases. I'm just wondering if that is a typo or if that's intentional. I thought we had changed the whole thing to 2 years. So just a clarification, if someone can please speak to that.
Ms. Kiefer, please.
Certainly through you, Mayor Craig. The intention is that they would be for 2 years. And then as every other agreement before has been 5, that's why it was left in the agreement, but it would have to come back to council anyway after 2 years. So council would decide at that point how long they wanted to extend after 2 years.
All in favor of the motion? Anyone opposed? Now it's carried. The Kincardine Scottish and Highland Games Agreement bylaw.
Moved by Doug Kennedy, seconded by Beth Blackwell, that the Kincardine Scottish Festival and Highland Games Agreement 2023 bylaw be deemed to read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, numbered as bylaw 2023-045.
Any discussion? All in favor? It's carried. The Theatre Guild Agreement bylaw, please.
Moved by Bill Stewart, seconded by Jennifer Prenger, that the Kincardine Theatre Guild Agreement 2023 bylaw be deemed to read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, numbered as bylaw 2023-046.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Motion to move into committee of the whole, please.
Moved by Mike Kinchberger, seconded by Andrea Clark, that council move into committee of the whole and upon completion, return to council.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Kincardine at 5:14 on April 3rd in the council chambers. The roll call remains the same, and we'll note that there are some attending by electronic means. Are there any amendments, additions, or deletions to or from the agenda? Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, I'd like to add an addition. I think we'll put it under reports, if that's okay, Jennifer, 7D, and it'll be the Davidson Center incident for now.
May I have a mover and seconder for that addition, please? Moved by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Deputy Mayor Clark, please. Any more discussion? All in favor? And that is carried. Once again, remind you, if there's any pecuniary interest, to disclose it now or as it arises during the meeting. The adoption of the minutes. Clerk, please.
Moved by Amanda Steinhoff Gray, seconded by Doug Kennedy, that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held on March 20th, 2023 be adopted as printed.
All in favor? That's carried. Delegations. I'd like to welcome our warden, the mayor of mayors. From the county perspective, Chris Peabody, the mayor of Brockton. He and the county CAO, Derek Thompson, are here, and they are going to be providing some information as one of our external partners within our role as municipal council. So Warden Peabody, Derek, thank you for being here tonight.
Yes. On behalf of Bruce County Council, I'd like to thank Mayor Craig for this invitation. As warden, this is something that I've definitely wanted to do alongside with our CAO, Thompson, is to reach out to the other municipalities and build a spirit of cooperation and collaboration on all the very important issues that we're working on, such as affordable housing and long-term care. So I'm very glad to be here tonight. One of the issues of collaboration that we had, a concrete example, is your economic development officer Sherry Leslie. She accompanied us to the MIPIM conference over in France, and we worked very well together, and she did a great job of helping us to round up contacts. We rounded up 18 contacts that our economic development officers at both the county and throughout the municipalities are following up on. So that's a great example. And Sherry did a great job. I'm a bit biased. She was a student of mine at Sacred Heart High School, so it was great to see her in action, but so so I'll hand things over to Derek, and I'll also mention that we also have our deputy CEO, Christine McDonald, here tonight. So we've got lots of county representation tonight. So Derek?
Thank you, thank you, Warden Peabody, and thank you, Mayor Craig, and members of Kincardine Municipal Council. It's wonderful to be here and be invited to be here. So thank you very much for that. I've prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you, go over some of the core functions of the county. So on that, I'll get started. So the county is made up of 11 service areas or 11 departments, depending on your viewpoint of the organization. We have the Office of the CEO, we have Transportation Environmental Services, Human Services, or I want to say Pandemic Service all the time, but it's Paramedic Services, Long-Term Care, Museum and Culture, Library, Planning and Development, and ACTEV, our Corporate Services, and our Information Technology, and of course, our Human Resources departments. So I'll just go through, in fairness of time, of the Office of the CEO is responsible for corporate communications, also strategic initiatives, legislative services, and of course, the warden stole my thunder tonight because she is here, our newly appointed Deputy CEO, Christine McDonald. So very happy to have her on board in the office. She is going to be a great help from my office so that we can start to become very laser focused on our strategic and intergovernmental initiatives. So we're very excited for that. Some of the things that we are working on this year is, of course, we're completing our corporate strategic plan this year. We are doing ongoing work on our organizational structure to become more efficient. We are, as I mentioned, going down the path of a intergovernmental office relationship piece. And we'll continue with our Indigenous reconciliation. And of course, we're looking at our corporate facility resource plan. As you'll see, as we go through these slides this evening, we've got a lot of facilities, a lot of staff, and how we manage that is very important. So I'm just going to go back. So our environmental or transportation environmental services department, you can see we've got 623 kilometers of roads, 148 bridges, 180 kilometers of trails, and around 4,700 hectares of forest that we maintain. I don't have to tell you this, the county is a huge geographic area from Tobermory all the way down to Kincardine. It's a huge area for us to manage. So some of the initiatives we're working through in our works in transportation is obviously ongoing work on our bridge replacements. We are in the process of working on our transit demand study. We're also working on our active transportation plan and around our trails, and creating a master plan. As you know, through the pandemic, these types of activities outdoors were really important to folks. So we want to maintain our very high usage of those facilities. And also we're working on a waste management plan in consultation with the MIC and our other local municipal partners. And finally, we're looking at our climate change action plan as we move forward. Our human services department, I feel guilty that I'm up here talking about human services when Christine really was responsible for all this work. So as you can see, it's a huge portfolio. It's one of our biggest portfolios. We do everything from our business integration to our children's services, housing facilities, housing services, income support services, and strategic community initiatives as well. Throughout the focus of this department, we're looking at a number of different components around personal-centric services, also our accessing licensed childcare facilities, integrated management as we work through Ontario Works, and also we're looking at another potential $2.3 million worth of capital works in our ongoing facilities as well. Again, this is paramedics, not pandemic. I got that one right this time, so I feel better. As you know, we do provide paramedic services throughout the county. We've been working on our community paramedicine program, and just recently was announced that that funding will continue for our local, our paramedics. So we're very excited about that. We actually have a Ministry of Health and Emergency Service review this year, which is really a benchmark for how the department itself is operating. So we welcome that. As you probably know, we're working towards a new station in Sauble Beach, as well as the opening of our Saugeen Shores paramedic location. But also we're continuing to work on our community management CEMC this year. And I'm happy that I have had some conversations with your CEO, and we're looking at partnering and sharing some knowledge base across both the areas. So let's make it stronger as we move forward. And as I mentioned, the new Port Elgin paramedic station is well underway. So our next department is long-term care and senior services. I don't think I have to tell you that during the pandemic, this area was one of the hardest hit areas as we went through the pandemic. The work that those folks did and our management team with Megan there, actually did amazing work. All the staff there, from the RNs, the PSWs, to the environmental service staff, as well as our housekeeping and our meal staff, were just outstanding. I can't say enough about them. But what you will see in the different initiatives as we move forward in this department is around operating capacity. As you know, it's very difficult to get those resources, so we continue to rely on agency staff, which isn't ideal, but it's a necessary component right now. We're also looking at technology advancements on charting, so that less time spent writing on paper, more time spent with the persons that matter the most in those homes. And also really around culture of the organization and the environment in which those folks work. It's a very high stressed job, to say the least, and we are really trying to make the culture and the work-life balance as best as we can, given the very strenuous work that's being conducted in those locations. Our museum and cultural services, so it's broken up into 3 different elements, which is our museum, our archives, and the cultural center. We're very excited to offer a number of different programs. Our volunteer program is under review, so is our education program. And we continue to work on a museum expansion possibility as well. And much like your recreation services, we are all still recovering from the pandemic and loss of visitors to that program. So we continue to work on that and invite people back to that program. So we're very excited about that. Then we move on to our public libraries. As you know, we provide library service across the county as well. Very exciting news that the bookmobile is going to be delivered shortly, and we're very excited about that. That'll allow us to bring that service out to different locations across the county. As I mentioned, it's a very large county, and we like to make sure we can get as many people involved in the library as we can. We continue to work on staff and our health and safety, and of course, branch improvements is one of our capital priorities this year as well. The next is what's probably really important to you, is our planning and development department. So we do land use planning, economic development, and new to us is employment services, which I can't take any credit for whatsoever. Was Christine's initiative and bid with the province to take on that role, and we were successful in doing that, and it's been very successful as far as the implementation goes. But it's very exciting for us. Some of our major initiatives, obviously, is the OP this year. That is our first and foremost project that we want to get landed this year. We're talking about Spruce to Bruce improvements, as well as we move through our economic development. And I also mentioned our employment services piece. Again, I talk about France, but the warden stole my thunder on that again, so it's all good. So corporate services is another division that we have that really is really your finance piece, which this year we're looking at a development charge study, bringing that back to county council. Risk management strategy, and as you probably all well aware of, our asset management plans are continuing to move along and being able to be finished hopefully by July of this year. Information technology is another one of our areas. It's changed so much over the last little while, and cybersecurity has become a major issue with our organizations. Not only is it important to secure our own data, but if we now apply for provincial or federal grants, they are right in the contract asking for a certain level of cybersecurity that needs to be included. So this is becoming more and more of an issue for both the lower municipalities and us as well. Sorry, we go back one more. So we talked a little bit about the confidence integrity of the information, and I'm sure you're aware that your CEO and I are working on a framework to allow hopefully some shared services in this area, which we're very, very excited about. And hopefully we can bring you back more information as that starts to come to fruition. And last but not least, and Sean Morphy, who's the director, would kill me for saying that, but human resources is our last department to go through today. Sorry, a little quick on the trigger today. So some of the major initiatives we're working on is our non-union salary market review, our Avanti mobile app, which is really a self-serve mobile app for employees to be able to do everything from book vacation to look at what their benefits are. It's a really great app. We're revamping our recruitment process. As you can imagine, we go through a number of recruitments, both in long-term care at an alarming rate. So we're looking at making that process more efficient. We're looking at a retention program for our staff. And of course, we're looking at our disability management sick plan and review as well, but also striving to be a top employer. One of the major issues that I think all municipalities are facing is workforce. And we're striving hard to be able to make changes to our organization so that we can be an employer of choice. And Mr. Mayor, thank you. That's all I have, but I'm happy to entertain questions.
Thank you to both you and Warden Peabody. Are there any questions from council members? I go to Councillor Kennedy, please.
Yeah, through the chair. You know, I was certainly glad to hear you about shared services. I really believe that's something that we need to do a lot better job, as we all realize with the tax rates that we're dealing with and new staff that we had to have. You know, IT, I understand Bruce County put a fourth person into IT, where I'm sure there probably isn't a municipality that doesn't need more staff, you know, in that. And another example is we just got our roofs evaluated in the whole municipality. Maybe different municipalities could go together and get those sort of things done that could save us money. I'm just kind of hoping that, you know, that can be a goal of ours in the next 4 years, sitting around these tables and, you know, share some costs that I don't think, I'm not sure, maybe we're doing it that I don't know about, but I think we can do a lot better. And those are just a couple examples. And I just really think that's important. So.
Great.
Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kennedy. I couldn't agree with you more. The warden alluded to it a little bit in his opening around wanting to work closer with the local municipalities to be able to provide not only shared services, but really knowledge transfers as well back and forth. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity for us all to work together. I mean, we're certainly making strides in that vein to do that. I think you'll see a proposal that'll be coming to you probably within the end of the month that really cements that whole focus on what working together, both on an efficiency piece, but also on an innovative piece looks like. So I'm really excited that hopefully will come to you before the end of the month. And that really will really cement the idea of what you're talking about, is working together for the benefit of all the taxpayers.
Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Thank you. Yeah, my question was also on the same vein, but there's one thing I would like to say first before I go into that question. I just want to really applaud the services for long-term care. My grandmother is a resident at Gateway, and I can't speak enough about how wonderful the staff are, caring and supportive. They're absolutely incredible. I'm thoroughly inspired by the level of care that she receives. So I just thank you for that service that you provide, but acknowledge that the waiting lists are huge. So understanding what we do for that crisis is going to become increasingly important. and acknowledging the burden that COVID put on with the number of people we could allow into a room with some of the ward units. So just a thank you there, but acknowledging we probably have some more work to do on that side of it. But the question I was going to ask was shared costs. Actually, one of the things I was wondering about is what data we store in the cloud versus have cloud providers do the storage for us. Because one of the things I was thinking about is, as like a municipality, we're starting to do online payments, and how do we protect the information of those people that are putting in credit card payments and such for the different fines and bylaw levies, et cetera, et cetera. You know, my personal identity has been compromised, I think about 4 times, even once through the Mount Sinai Milk Bank, which I donated through. So it's just one of those things I think we need to look at. And I would really love to see the county as kind of the parent level and us as the municipalities as lower tiers that support one another. Whether it's, you know, we all seem to use the exact same software. So if it's just having each one of the municipalities choose one of those softwares that they become the resident expert on, and then we go to one another to like share out that lion's den of work. But I think that cyber hacks are becoming more and more a reality. So understanding where we have the accountability versus our cloud provider that we are subcontracting to, I would love more information on.
Great. Yes, thanks very much. So for your first part of your question about long-term care, so thank you very much for that. I will certainly take back that to the staff. So thank you very much for that. That's exactly the work that we're undertaking around what does cybersecurity, what does IT services look like, what's the most efficient way to do it, but also the most secure way to do it. So that work is ongoing, and we continue to work with your CEO and staff, and hopefully we'll be able to come back with a very detailed report so that you can understand exactly where we're going or where we would like to go. And you're absolutely correct. Cybersecurity is, if not one of the major issues with municipalities now. Never was before, but it is now. So.
As a follow-up, sorry, just as a quick follow-up, do we have like business continuity plans for how long we can go without items? Because if we ever got hacked, we might lose access to our data and understanding what's gone into the cloud versus how long we can survive without access to certain information that's stored if we were ever to be part of a ransom activity.
So I would suggest to you that I don't have your detailed information around how you manage your data. I would be cautious around what you want to share publicly about how you're storing your data right at the moment. Just as a safeguard, it's something you may want to.
No, that's a perfect coach. I totally agree with you. I wouldn't want it on too much information put on the public avenue for that. I was just curious if we'd done business continuity planning based on where our technical, it's just a high level yes or no, sorry.
We'll look forward to the answer to that question when you bring back the report regarding the collaboration on IT. I'm not going to make you go down that path, Derek. I'm trying to save you here. Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. Councillor.
No, thank you. I'm sorry if I was too aggressive. Thank you.
No.
I really do appreciate it,
No,
the information.
No.
You're just being Amanda, and we love you for it. So, Councillor Hinchberger and then Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you for coming tonight. There's a couple of items on your slide deck that caught my interest. One of them was in the area of transportation and environmental services, and it talked about the transit demand study. Is this like a study related to the road infrastructure that's owned by the county, or is this more one that might look towards, say, possibly the provision of public transit? That's my first one.
Yeah. So the sort of engagement in that study was, how do we connect the county with transit systems? What are the different options available for connecting the county? But also, what does it look like for our municipal partners as well? So that study is really in its infancy as we move forward. We're just working through our engagement plans and how we're going to engage the public as it relates to the connectivity of how we connect together as a county but also just through that conversation, we're going to have conversations around what does that mean for our municipal partners as well, and how do they connect together? So it's really a very broad study around what does connectivity look like across the county, and how do we connect the county together?
So what I heard, it's not just intra-county, it can also be inter-county as well.
Correct.
Okay, I have a second, but I'll wait till after Councillor Stewart.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mayor, first of all, Warden Peabody, thank you very much for the pen. It works very well. Just want to ask a question. We're all facing this, all the municipalities. Our infrastructure bill's getting higher and higher. And pretty soon it's going to bury the taxpayers. We just won't be able to afford to replace and renew. I'm hoping that we can count on you to lobby the provincial and federal government for a little more money for the gas tax. At one time, the gas tax used to cover all the roads. And to be honest with you, the amount they collect right now would cover the roads about 10 times over, but it's not given to us. So make sure you lobby every time you see a politician to try to get a little more gas tax for our roads. Because like you, we're probably one of the bigger areas with roads and bridges, and it's costing us a fortune. So thank you.
So I'm so excited you asked me that question. The whole concept of the intergovernmental position and paper that we're trying to work on is exactly that, is to lobby provincial and federal agencies to fund Bruce County appropriately. I am not from the county, but I was very surprised when I came to the county that we have very little presence in both those large government bodies. And the whole point of the intergovernmental strategy is to change that, is to lobby hard for what we deserve in Bruce County.
Deputy Mayor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's been informative. I echo perhaps some of what Councillor Kennedy said with regards to, I'm pleased to hear about the resource sharing and the road you're going down. When I was looking through, and I think when you were presenting, I may have missed it, but it didn't seem like one of the priorities, and correct me if I'm wrong, listed was that of mental health and addiction, which is certainly something that's pretty, it's prevalent, I would say, in the county. And it's something that's going to presumably require both an integrated and comprehensive approach to address those issues, not only at county level, but provincial as well. I don't know if you could address that any further.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. Well, it's a great question, and tonight you have another presentation from the Deputy CEO and members of the Wellness Group, which is going to be able to give you much more detailed information about the work that we support, that we're doing on mental health and homeless and addiction. So I don't want to steal their thunder, because then they'll be mad at me. So I don't want to do that. They're up, I think, next after me. So you're going to get a very fulsome presentation around that. I think maybe.
Sorry, I think I was just really asking and hoping for the assurance that it is one of the priorities that the county is working towards.
Absolutely. So through our Human Services Department, we fund a number of different initiatives around addiction support, homelessness, and also mental health. And you're going to hear more about that at the next presentation, but certainly it's top of mind for our staff and as we move forward.
And just
That
as
adds
as an addition to that, Deputy Mayor, the Grey Bruce Public Health, of which Bruce County is a partner in that work too. They're focused on particularly the opioid crisis, and mental health care is dominating more and more of the agenda every month. So the short answer is yes. Warden Peabody, please.
Yeah, just so to address that, Deputy Mayor, as Warden and Mayor, it's been a priority of mine whenever I do lobby the government, and I have, as we all do, a great relationship with our MPP Lisa Thompson, but this is one area where I have been critical of the government, is their lack of support on the homeless and mental illness supports. And I was quite glad to see in the budget they did put $600 million into that area. So I'd like to think that the lobbying collectively of all the councillors who see those problems on the ground did contribute to that extra money, and I'll continue lobbying for that. The county has sent several motions on that area. I've advocated for dedicated funding for our police forces to have a ride-along nurse for that's funded by the province. Right now, it's sort of an ad hoc basis where those nurses are funded to our detachments, as well as certainly been critical of the government on their housing allowance for ODSP was frozen, and I think it was raised though. Or they're talking about raising it. So yeah, not Ontario Works. So certainly lots of gaps that I've been critical of on that front, and glad that we've seen some progress, but as warden, I'll keep pushing away at that with the government.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. It was a second question for Derek, and it had to do with the long-term care and senior services, and it's kind of a follow-up to what Councillor Steinhoff Gray was talking about. The one item that had to do with long-term care operational capacity, and whether that's like solely focused on maximizing existing capacity, planning and development for new builds, and whether you could show any cards there on that front.
So, you know, to be honest, I would say to you that where we are currently with our capacity and given the restraints we have on workforce planning, we are not immediately looking at expanding it another home per se. What we're really looking for is some stabilization in the workforce piece. We are, as I said earlier, using agency staff at an alarming rate, but it's, you know, it's a necessary thing for us to be able to have enough staff to service and to support the people that we have. We have also sent a number of letters to the province asking them to look at agency costing and what it's doing, but I can assure you that we are no different than any other long-term care facility in Ontario right at the moment. It's been a challenge. And as we're a rural piece, if you will, it's difficult to find PSWs. We have done a number of things through our human resources department around. We're actually looking at trying to approach them before they graduate. We're looking at different incentives perhaps, but the workforce piece is a challenge right now. And hopefully when things will get a little better anyway, then we can start having a conversation about what does it look like for additional capacity or different beds.
Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Can I address that one? Mayor? Okay.
Oh, thank you very much. If I may, just through the chair here, when you talk about a workforce shortage, is it a demographics issue or is it an issue of compensation where you're finding that agency wages are probably 3 or 4 times more than what the current going rate is for your working staff? So it makes more sense for them to leave and work the exact same jobs one municipality over through an agency, and short of some kind of union busting tactic where you're willing to ban the use of agencies and trying to stifle the wage isn't the only option really to look at increasing pay to what the market would suggest should hold?
Well, let me try to unwrap that a little bit to get to what your point I think is. So there certainly is a challenge with the amount of compensation that the agencies are paying for those positions. The challenge that we have is that there's only so much that we can pay, and we have some limitations from the provincial legislation as we work through some of those things. The bottom line is that the agencies are marking up those salaries at an alarming rate, and folks have a choice, and folks choose to be able to go work for more money and pick and choose how they want to work. That's the way the market is right at the moment. But it's not just Bruce County Long-Term Care that's going through this process. Most hospitals are having the same issue. Every long-term care home that I know of that I deal with my colleagues are all facing the same issues. So I think it's a combination of things. It's a combination of the agencies have been able to go in and be able to pay an enormous amount of money to people to persuade them to go into that area. So we continue to lobby the provincial government to have a look at what is happening at the agencies and be able to put some restrictions on what's happening, or we'll continue to go through this issue with workforce, especially in long-term care.
Thank you very much.
Warden Peabody, did you want to make your comments now? I'm giving you the last word here.
Well, certainly, excellent questions, and it's a great discussion on all of the issues were excellent. The last question on the agency nurses, that's certainly a huge issue, and so certainly enjoyed the dialogue tonight. And once again, Mayor Craig, thank you for the invitation. And Derek and I look forward to some other invitations from the other mayors.
Thank you for spending your Monday evening with us. So I'll be interested to see if you stick around for the next presentation as well too. So a lot of pressure on you here. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, we'd like to welcome Sarah Pelton, our Deputy CAO, Christine McDonald from Bruce County, and Inspector Krista Miller from the Ontario or the Kincardine detachment of the OPP, who are going to present on our community safety and well-being plan. Sarah, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for the ability to present this evening. The overarching goal of community safety and well-being planning is to achieve sustainable communities where everyone is safe, has a sense of belonging and opportunities to participate, where everyone can meet their needs for healthcare, education, food, housing, income, social and cultural expression. So what does this mean, and how are we working towards this goal in Bruce and Grey? This approach means focusing on protecting people against risk factors that make them vulnerable to crime and victimization. We work collaboratively and cooperatively to identify duplications or gaps in service delivery, and we leverage strong working relationships between agencies and across sectors. We use data to track the collective impact of work in our communities and inform decision-making. And finally, one of the ultimate goals is to decrease the need for acute incident responses, such as emergency department visits and police services calls, which are reactive and costly. This is the provincial framework for the Ontario Community Safety and Wellbeing Planning. Acute incident responses, those reactive emergency responses, are at the middle of the bullseye. Our goal is to focus strategies on the three outer rings of risk intervention, prevention, and social development. So what does this look like? Ultimately, this means that everyone is aware of services that are available and how to access them for themselves and the clients they support. And where gaps have been identified, we're working together to address systemic issues through advocacy and building before addressing risks before a crisis occurs. A visual representation of prevention might look like this. If people are falling into a river, there is of course value and necessity to throwing in life preservers or sending ambulances to respond. It might even be prudent to build rafts or fund more ambulances so response times are faster. We might build hospitals closer to the river, but these are all reactive strategies. Pulling people to safety does not address the conditions that made them vulnerable to falling in the first place. So how do we determine who is at greatest risk? Can we identify and address some of these risk factors to prevent some people from falling in? This is our governance structure for the plan. Over 70 partners, including the municipality of Kincardine, have participated in this process and continue to serve on the advisory committee, including both counties, municipalities, police services, and police service boards, health, education, community services, and other agencies working across both counties. How did community safety and wellbeing planning start? Under the Community Safety and Policing Act, community safety and wellbeing plans were legislated for all municipalities in Ontario. The Ministry of the Solicitor General has identified some of the benefits as an increased understanding of risks, enhanced communication and collaboration, increased coordination and access to services, and finally, that reduced reliance on incident responses. For your reference, I've included links to the plan, which includes community survey results and data gathering, identification of areas of priority, and a broader discussion of the process and the background behind the planning, as well as the indicator report, which is the data framework, including key indicators from public health, emergency department and police data, 211 call trends, income and employment data, among others. When issues are referred to community safety and wellbeing planning, we're creating a framework for addressing them by referring them to an appropriate community agency or action table that's already working on those issues to leverage existing work that's happening in the community. Addressing gaps or needs through support or advocacy, such as a letter of support for a project, initiative, or funding application, or exploring opportunities for further research. Where possible, action tables aligning with our top priorities are existing organizations or collaborations. The Community Drug and Alcohol Strategy is the action table for addictions and substance use. The Bruce Gray Poverty Task Force is the action table for poverty and income. The Homelessness Response Table is the action table for housing and homelessness. Our mental health action table is in development, and we recently established a crime prevention action table that's bringing together community agencies, police services, and members of the public. We're also creating an assessment tool, which will help organizations identify and promote protective factors that help mitigate risks. This could include things like policies that offer subsidized recreation programming for low-income families or continued investment in physician recruitment programs so everyone has access to primary health care. Through a community safety and well-being lens, we're also looking at things like whose input is considered when decisions are made or when community outreach is undertaken. This tool will help ensure that we're asking key questions about protective and risk factors as part of our decision-making process. A situation table is a risk intervention model that was restarted in Gray and Bruce in mid-2021 under the purview of community safety and wellbeing planning. We have representatives from over 20 local agencies who meet weekly to present situations for discussion, determine appropriate supports needed for an intervention, and respond within 48 hours. This process does not take the place of long-term ongoing case management or long-term support, but it's designed to avert a crisis. 27 situations were presented in 2022. So far, we've had 6 in 2023. The expertise of those at the table is used to determine if a situation meets the criteria for acutely elevated risk. This means that chronic conditions have accumulated to a point of crisis or new circumstances have increased the risk of harm or victimization. And one agency alone does not have the resources to respond, so they bring it to the situation table. Determining acutely elevated risk is a judgment call. The group votes to determine if the situation meets the criteria, and agencies work together to determine how to address the needs. This model depends on trust and collaboration and strong working relationships between all agencies at the table. Data from the situation table will help us to identify top risk factors that make people vulnerable to crisis and agencies that are most frequently offering assistance. We may eventually be able to compare our data with other areas across Ontario, which may help us to better understand unique approaches to risk mitigation in rural communities. The top 3 services mobilized in 2022 related to housing, addiction support, and mental health supports. Data from other situation tables and long-term research on this approach suggests that the benefits are a decrease in emergency department visits and police responses, and an increase in collaboration between agencies. This is one strategy through which we're bringing together resources and generating solutions to help avoid potential crises. In the last year, we've also focused on branding, building a new website, creating social media campaigns, and creating a one-page summary of the goals and activities of this work. With these tools, we're continuing to work towards educating the community about the relationship between upstream prevention and a decrease in crime and victimization. The key to successful community safety and well-being is working together, using the experience and expertise of different sectors to target the root causes of complex issues, collaborating to ensure that everyone has access to the resources they need to thrive. We want to mitigate risks and address crises before they occur, and continue to build strong communities where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you. So I've heard this presentation before and it was just as good this time as it was last time too.
Thank you.
But there's a couple of extra pieces that I'm going to put a couple of extra people on the spot. And I'm going to say, you know, we've heard about the situation table and the number of partners, 70 organizations, including municipal governmental levels. But I'm wondering if Christine and Krista, could you, like when you come to the table as Bruce County through Human Resources or through the work of the Ontario Provincial Police, Krista, can you just explain briefly, like, what's it mean when you come to the table with your expertise? Like, what do you offer, or how do you engage in this conversation with these groups of people that say, okay, here's client A. What do we do with client A? Could you give us just a quick, this is what we do when we sit down at the table?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Craig. And first, I'll provide a bit of a distinction. So the 70 plus organizations, when we come together under the umbrella of community safety and well-being, is at a planning and prevention level and working on bringing together, coordinating and collaborating the various action tables. So there's a lot of complexity in all of this and a number of different initiatives that are underway. For example, you referenced earlier some of our crises that we're experiencing with opioid overdoses. And so there is a whole network process around notifications, how the paramedics work with public health, work with police, how that's communicated out to human serving organizations to help individuals, for example, be more prepared. And so there's all that networking and collaboration that takes place when there's events occurring. But the actual Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee is working together, planning collaboratively, and those other pieces fall into organizations' day-to-day mandates as well. So that's the 70 plus coming together. We're looking at issues, we're keeping each other informed and updated of work of the Community Drug and Alcohol Strategy, the Poverty Task Force, various other initiatives that are happening across Grey Bruce. The situation table for acute risk is a subsector of that 70 plus. So the situation table is primarily the police forces, police services working together with the human serving organizations. So it's not me and Krista that show up at the situation table. It's more of our frontline staff that are involved in supporting those crisis intervention as Sarah was referencing it. So Sarah facilitates those conversations that happen on a weekly basis. Staff from our organizations sit at the table, they go through the process, understand if it meets the criteria, and then work on a plan to support that household. So in some cases that involves going out and working directly with those individuals, connecting them to services to de-escalate the crisis. Most of the referrals come from the various police services because they're the ones that are experiencing the calls that are occurring and they're seeing the escalations that are happening in the home. So happy to answer any other questions, but that's a start.
I came prepared for this one. In regards to the police services, just to expand a little bit on what Christine was referring to. So the legislation that came out in 2019 does fall under the Community Safety and Policing Act. So it is through the Solicitor General. It was initiated as a crime prevention plan, but I think as we have all discovered, as we have worked together, it's way more than that. It's about keeping our communities well and whole as communities. Crime prevention is a benefit of the plan. So I sit on the steering committee with representatives from Bruce and Grey counties, as well as public health and victim services. With the 70 organizations that come to the table as the advisory committee, all police services in Bruce and Grey counties are represented there. So I am just one representative of all the police services in Grey and Bruce County. I do want to say that I read something recently that said that 80% of what police are dealing with now is not necessarily directly related to crime. It's actually related to social disorder. And I think on May 1st, when I come and give your year-end presentation, you will see that on all my year-end presentations for all 5 of the municipalities that we police in South Bruce. About 80% are social disorder issues. So mental health, drug and alcohol addiction, homelessness. The police get called because we are the 24/7 service. So being a part of this greater group that is working together, identifying the gaps and the risk factors and developing the strategies to approach them is extremely beneficial.
So I'm going to climb a little bit out on a very skinny branch here. Social disorder frequently comes down to the challenge of somebody needing a support network, somebody to hold their hand and go through life with. Like, we all need that. Community is so important. And I'm thinking of our Councillor Stewart here, who belongs to the Lions. I'm looking at some of our public here who belong to churches. And I'm wondering, are those sort of, and not that the Lions aren't professional, not that the churches aren't professional, that's not what I'm saying, but there's a very grassroots approach to those 2 organizations. Are organizations like that represented somewhere in this process, or is it understood that, we're just folks here and we don't play a part? Like, how does the grassroots get involved in supporting people? Are they part of the process, or are they, where are they in that chain?
Thanks for that. That's a great question, Mayor Craig. And I'll start, and then I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to talk a little bit more about the crime prevention table as well, too. So as we coordinate what services, resources are available for people in community, 211 is a very important part of this puzzle. And so 211 is our community mapping, our directory of all the different supports that people can have available to them. So many of our nonprofits are connected to and would be profiled in 211. That allows anyone who's, interacting with the police that might be referred to 211 for supports or other avenues to access what's available in our community. And we at the bottom of the website of Bruce County have a customized 211. It's called Bruce Gray Community Information that anyone can access at any time, that has the full directory of all those services. So happy to put any of those groups in touch to make those connections. Definitely, we recognize that both formal and informal supports are part of developing a community that supports people's safety and well-being. And it goes back to looking at those outer rings of the circle, where we want to provide development opportunities for people to be engaged in ways where they feel they belong, they're included, they have what they need, and also opportunities to work collaboratively around preventing issues and moving strategies forward. So room for everyone, both formal and informal supports to participate. And the reason why I'm going to ask Sarah to talk about the crime prevention action table specifically is it's a great way for the broader public to engage in the entire process.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks for the question. So we have just begun our work with the crime prevention action table, which is bringing together a few representatives from police services, but mostly members of the public. So we put out a broad call to members from Bruce and Gray, people who wanted to become involved. And what we're really looking at through that primarily is the education piece around creating strong senses of community and well-being and belonging, and what that looks like and how that impacts crime prevention. So we have a number of people representing education. We have someone from Crime Stoppers. We have a few community members who come with their own expertise and ability to look at these issues in different ways, and they don't represent particular agencies that are sitting in our advisory committee. So that gives us a little more breadth to the way we're tackling these issues as well. And we would invite anyone to become involved in that as well. We're just getting started. We've had 2 meetings so far.
Okay, we'll go to some questions, and first on the list is Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm curious if you have any programs for students and young people, particularly when we talk about diversion and not being reactive. I feel like sometimes kids may get into trouble just because of the lack of activities in the community that could, keep them occupied, things that interest them, or whether it's congregation areas for those kids. And I think it's a multi-agency response. But even when you look at mental health and the impacts that COVID had with the isolation of our youth, I'm just curious if that's anything that you guys have looked at, because I do think that it would require a joint, like, multi-agency response. So that would be my first question.
Christine, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. So Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory does not provide service other than the situation table for acute response. So the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory is really the planning work, trying to set our community up better for the future, collaborating and engaging so that we're leveraging the resources we do have. Others that are involved that are members, yes, they will have programs where they provide services where they interact and engage with youth. So for example, Keystone, which is our children's mental health agency for Gray and Bruce, is involved in community safety and well-being. Public Health has various youth initiatives, and there are other youth serving organizations within Bruce and Gray. Again, that information could be found on 211 if you're interested in learning more about those pieces of information. So the one service that we deliver directly for people, which is still in collaboration with all the partners, is the situation table for acute response. So just to provide that distinction there. And I feel like there was a second part that you asked that I've now forgotten about.
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Gather your thoughts, Councillor. Other questions? Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. I'm happy to sit on this committee. My background is in social services, and a lot of the work that I do is navigating the sometimes really challenging world of finding help. It may be out there, sometimes it's not, but even just trying to get connected. So I'm a big proponent of 211 and the work being done. I have two questions, but the first one I think is that reading through the report and in my own work, a lot of the protective elements, or what we consider the preventative elements, seem to have been either underfunded provincially, downloaded, housing, income supports, healthcare and addictions, employment. I'm just curious, like we talked earlier when the warden was here about the lobbying, and I think gathering the information and being able to see the gaps through the STAR program. Is that part of this program as well? Is to continue to say, like, as municipalities, we don't have the capacity, and as nonprofits, they're not funded necessarily well enough to actually implement the plan, perhaps?
That's a great question. And agree with you that it is important for us to be having these conversations. So as Detachment Commander Miller was mentioning, that this was under the Solicitor General. It was required that municipalities have a plan. No funding is attached to that. So we receive no funding from the Solicitor General. We are able to apply for one-time pieces of funding for particular programs, which we continue to do where it's applicable. And so there's no funding attached to that. In Gray and Bruce, we knew that we have joint organizations that are regional. So our mental health organizations are regional, our school boards are regional, our public health is regional. It didn't really make a lot of sense for us to have 17 individual local level plans. And so that's why we came together and said that Gray and Bruce would jointly lead, bring everyone together, so that we're leveraging that, we're not duplicating efforts. So that's an important part to consider there. We continue to advocate every opportunity we have. In 2022, we took a delegation to Roma and talked about the work that we were doing, and we were congratulated on the great work that we were doing, but no funding has come. Just recently at the ask of the advisory committee, Sarah has penned a letter to go to the Solicitor General again to talk about our local local concerns around funding, understanding better what next steps will be. Right now, the legislative framework simply says thou shall have a plan. But we know that we want to do something with that plan because we want to have positive outcomes and impacts in our communities, right? So we continue to ask those questions, and all of this will be connected to any of the advocacy work that the county's doing at that level. And I know earlier there was a question about our priorities around mental health. And definitely it's woven into various departments in terms of how we're addressing mental health needs. The strategic community initiatives that we're working on, such as community safety and wellbeing, do fall under the Human Services Department. And we have strong relationships with both our adult mental health agency, which we fund to provide some supports around homelessness and stability services. And we also work closely with our children's mental health with the children's programs that we have as well too, and with the school boards. So we're trying to coordinate and collaborate and leverage what resources we do have, but excellent question.
Follow up, Councillor Blackwell? No. Yeah? Okay. Do you have a question? Councillor Hinchberger.
Did. Thank you through you, Mayor. Thank you for coming tonight. One item that caught my attention on the slides was an indicator report. So I quickly went while a lot of questions were being asked, and it was easy to find, and which is terrific. A lot of useful information. One thing is it a lot of indicators? The first part of my question would be: is this report looks like it might be ready for an update based on some more current data? When's that going to happen? And the second is, based on, there's a lot of indicators in there related to issues that we haven't even talked about here. So one of my questions would be is, if there's an issue that you think is significant right now that requires some focus that isn't amongst the ones that we've publicly gone to, what would that be?
So the indicator report, the plan is to republish at intervals as applicable, right? So when we do have data, so that we can see how are we doing, the efforts that we're taking together, are they making a difference? Part of the questions that we've just put before the Solicitor General is, at one point we had an understanding we would be receiving more information from the province about what that would look like. We haven't. And so before we go ahead and do that work, we just want to check in with them and understand what their expectations are, so that we're not jumping ahead. But it is the plan of the advisory committee to republish the indicator report at intervals. We're talking about shifting major elements of community. And so generally an appropriate zone would, a plan like that would be updated every, 3 to 5 years, depending on, what the requirements are for funding or other pieces. So definitely that's a plan that's in the works. We went through an intensive process engaging community and the organizations that are around the table when we identified what our top areas of priorities are. And so is everything in there important? Yes, but since we have to focus on which areas are most important, the advisory committee is still in a place where it feels like the work that we're doing definitely are those most important areas. So housing, which we know is at the forefront of discussions in Grey and Bruce, our mental health, addictions piece, the crime prevention table that Sarah was talking about, which is an important priority, was actually a real focus of the community input. So when we engaged through survey and conversations with the community members really wanted to understand and grow their knowledge and awareness of what's actually happening with crime. And so that's really a priority that was coming from the community.
Councillor Steinhoff, Gray, please, and then Deputy Mayor Clark.
Yeah, I had just one question, which I'm thinking you might be able to answer, but have you noticed a huge increase in certain areas? Like, I'm thinking homelessness. I know for me personally, I've seen signs of it, which I don't really recollect ever having seen in this area before, which I've found quite unsettling myself. So I'm just curious if you could help me understand how much, like if our plans go 3 to 5 years, how much you've seen an increase over the last cycle, of some of these problem areas. I feel like it's getting worse as opposed to better. So if you could help me understand the increase, that would be helpful.
So homelessness and supports around housing are increasing. It's a separate piece in terms of it is a mandated program of the County of Bruce. So the County of Bruce, through the Human Services Department, is responsible for service system management of homelessness and housing, and actually will be consulting and engaging with community this year to work on updating our next 10-year plan. So again, community safety and well-being advisory is about bringing all these various unique key priority areas together in one place so that people can start to understand where there's intersections, how the complexity overlaps, and then how various organizations each can take on pieces of work that fit their own mandate. But definitely we know that our wait lists for rent geared to income housing are increasing in Bruce County. And we also have completed our homelessness enumeration, which we did see an increase from the enumeration previous. So definitely we know there are more housing needs in our community, and we'll be updating with our 2024 housing and homelessness plan, which the work is just about to begin with that. What has been released already that might help provide even some more data about what's happening locally is our demographic study. So those are all available on the county website, and happy to share those pieces of information if you need them.
Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you for the presentation this evening, and thank you for all the work that's being done. It's undoubtedly quite a challenge to do with the lack of funding. I just wonder, in terms of the advisory committee, is one of the elements that you consider when, I suppose, doing some sort of strategic planning, when looking at the resources, do you look at equitable access depending upon the demographics? And I wonder if you could just maybe comment a little bit on how that plays into your strategic planning.
So yes, and one of the action tables, and I missed saying that when I talked about our priorities earlier, is income related and poverty. So that's one element of it, where the Poverty Task Force is another collaborative group that is an action table for community safety and well-being advisory. And so there is an element there as well. All of the human serving organizations that come to the table, each are working on ensuring that access is available. So I can speak to, at Bruce County, what we're doing in that regards in terms of ensuring that there is equitable access around housing, around childcare, around, various services. And each of the other organizations that are mandated to do particular things are also needing to look at those things. If earlier in the slides, Sarah showed how we identify and go through a process of understanding what is happening. And so if there was a particular item that came to the table where we identified that was an issue and it wasn't something in play, then we would talk about what steps do we take. Are we planning some local work? Are we planning an advocacy level to another level, or a letter to another level of government? What steps are we taking? So the short answer is yes, it's considered, but there are a multitude of ways that might occur. Additionally, we have been working on creating an organizational assessment tool for local municipalities and other organizations to take a deeper dive into thinking about those things locally. So when you make policy decisions and program decisions, are you keeping that community safety and well-being lens in mind? And so that's another tool, and we are very grateful. Your staff person Lori's been involved in supporting those conversations happening. So that's another piece of work that's underway as well too, to provide that tool to local municipalities to take a look at it and say, do we have any goals we want to implement for ourselves in terms of moving things along? Do we think we're doing good? What are our areas of strength? Which allows us to create community of best practice so that the municipalities can learn from each other around those initiatives as well too.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mayor, thank you very much, Sarah and Christine. Excellent. I'm not going to ask you, Inspector Miller, tonight, but this thing is really interesting. And, you know, when you start talking about well-being on your officers and everything, I know you're coming back to us in April, is it? 1st of May. I would prepare an hour because I'd really like to get a deep diving and understand this thing because it sounds like this is taking a lot of your time. I'd like to know what we do. This is something that we fund, you know, the police. So let's make sure we reserve an hour and I'll do some deep diving with you at that particular time. Thank you.
You're welcome to answer if there is a response to the,
I just was going to say there is a lot of rhetoric in the last number of years about the cost of policing. And the owners of this plan are the municipalities. I love Sarah's line about looking at the decisions that you make with a community and safety well-being lens for our communities. But I can tell you from a policing perspective, this plan and everybody working together is essential for our communities.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you. I just wanted to chat a little bit. It's in the appendix kind of our presentation about the risk and protective factors. And I may be interpreting them slightly wrong. But so what I'm seeing is those are potential risk factors for criminal activity. Is that correct? Okay. Because when we were talking a little bit, instead of necessarily looking specifically at like a crime prevention, but in terms of considering community well-being, I was a bit surprised not to see more potential demographic information within there in terms of like age or disability, cultural, and thinking about kind of a little bit there to Deputy Clark's point around potential equitable access or things like our IDEA committee and some of the work we're doing around that. Do you, I guess one of the things when I was reading through the indicator report, there was you know, how many people identify as from a different culture or have a different skin color. And then it was like, who's faced discrimination. And so the percentage of people that identified as essentially non-white was around like 2%. And then the people that have experienced discrimination or feel they haven't experienced discrimination was like 97%, which like seems kind of in line. So I'm just curious whether those are being considered at all, whether that will come to the like municipal table when we're considering policies, like how that's being built in as a potential factor for victimization or, you know, discrimination or lack of integration into the community.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the risk and protective factors listed there align with the provincial risk tracking database. So these are the risk factors associated with crime and disorder for the situations primarily that are coming to the situation table. So they allow us to align some of those risks with eventual behaviors or encounters with police or other frontline services. When we look at what the municipality can do and this organizational assessment tool that we're building, and Lori has consulted significantly on that to help us build it. Those are some of the questions we're asking, right? So whose input is being considered when we're making decisions, and do people feel like they belong? So if you hold a community event, who's attending, right? And do we know why certain people or certain groups of people may not be attending or may be attending? How are we conducting outreach? Are we reaching out to people who might be vulnerable or marginalized or discriminated against in some way? I was thinking as I was coming here that a really good example of this is the Multicultural Day, right? Which provides in Kincardine, which historically has provided an opportunity for people to learn and grow and develop those pro-social relationships in an environment that's really positive and allows for that community building. So those are the types of long-term things that we're looking at. But in terms of short-term, what has an impact, we are going to provide this tool, which will allow you to assess some of those things within the municipality and look at whether there are opportunities to sustain or improve or build those in different ways to address the things that are important here.
I'd like to thank, I'm sorry, did you have a question? Councillor Prenger, please.
Thank you, through the chair. I wanted to thank you for this presentation. I admit I was not well educated on this whole initiative, and I was thrilled to learn this much about it. That being said, I want to do a bit more digging before I actually have a question. because I have lots, but I knew I can find some of the answers myself and I won't drag this out. So what I really want to do is just comment and say thank you for the work you're doing. I understand the challenges of interdisciplinary and interdepartmental projects. And I am actually very impressed with what you've accomplished so far. And I'm really looking forward to how this is going to support our communities. So thank you.
So I'd like to express our thanks to Sarah Pelton, Christine McDonald, and Inspector Krista Miller for being here tonight to talk on community safety and well-being. And we look forward to engaging with and hearing more of the good work you're doing, just as Councillor Prenger expressed. So thank you. All right. Okay. I'm just, somebody's going to ask for a bio break here in no time, but he's not here. He can just, yeah. So I'd like to invite Dr. Janice Gilbert and our staff member, Karen Kiefer, to the front. You might recall Dr. Gilbert and we had a significantly challenged connection last time. And she is here in person to give us an update on our Phragmites program and the successes we're having there. Dr. Gilbert, welcome this evening.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here in person, actually. So maybe it was just a blessing in disguise. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you again. I shortened my presentation from a couple weeks ago, so you'll probably be happy to know that. I'll give you the Coles Notes version. So yeah, so for those of you that aren't familiar with Phragmites, I thought I'd just give you a brief overview about the plant and then why it's such an issue. Talk about the control program that's been going on in your municipality, and then a provincial initiative that you may not be aware of, and then just talk a little bit about where I think should be heading. Phragmites is a grass. We do have a native one in the landscape. The one that we're dealing with is from Europe, and it's actually identified as Canada's worst invasive plant by scientists from Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada back in 2005. This is native Phragmites, and it tends to quote unquote behave itself, grow amongst our native plants. You do have this on your shoreline. And this is invasive Phragmites when it's first getting established. So this is the time when it's really great to get at it, but most people don't even know they have a problem until it gets to this point. And this was your shoreline, not to me, many years ago. Yeah. So it's a grass, it's perennial grass. So it spreads through rhizomes and stolons. These clones can be on the landscape a long time. Like if we look at how it behaves itself in its native landscape over in Europe, it grows clonally, these large, massive cells. So Mother Nature doesn't beat it back. And it has a number of mechanisms for spreading seeds and viable plant parts. And so once these land in moist exposed sediment, they'll get established. So here's what you see this time of year, got the reseed head blowing in the wind in the spring. So that's coming up very shortly. If these seeds land in moist sediment, they'll start to germinate. Another way it can spread is along your shoreline. If there's a storm and there's Phragmites already established there, it can just rip it all out and reestablish it somewhere else along the shoreline. So here's a little picture of a viable plant part that's blown into the shore and it's setting up a shoot and a root. Or if the stalk falls in the water, it can start sprouting at every node along the plant. So basically, once the roots get established, it's all happening below ground. So what you see above ground, you can multiply that by several times below ground, and it just spreads at an astronomical rate. Those plant parts below ground can go really deep to get the water and nutrients they need. And so basically, you can get really high density. So this is a profile below the sediment. You don't tend to see this. Above would be really high biomass of Phragmites, and this is a tightly packed roots and rhizomes that can go quite a ways down. This is the example of that exponential growth. So this is one stolon coming off of one parent plant that's in amongst our native plants, and it can send these off in different directions all through the growing season. And each one of these will start to become a parent plant and do the same thing. It's a very aggressive plant because it just can tolerate a lot of different habitat conditions, brackish waters that do well in our roadside ditches even after a bad winter, variable water depth that has strategies for getting the water dry conditions or adapting to high water table. Low nutrient sites doesn't matter. Mind you, if it's growing in really high nutrients like agricultural drainage ditch or whatever, I've seen it over 5 meters tall. Variable pH, it basically is on every continent in the world except the Antarctic. So here's a strategy it used as Lake Huron levels increased. At every node, it would send out these really feathery roots that would capture the oxygen in the water and send them down to the roots to keep it from drowning. It's a really strong competitor for nutrients, and I've actually haven't seen any of our native plants outcompete it, and that includes willow or cattail. It also sends a toxin at the roots to kill the roots of adjacent plants, and basically there's no natural control in the landscape. Humans have to control it. We have a significant issue on the Great Lakes. All these red dots represent where it is. There's a lot of red dots missing in Ontario, but you get the picture. It's a significant issue. The IGC actually mentioned it in the report a couple of years ago. There is a binational group, the Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative, which I'm a part of. We share information, what's happening stateside and in Canada. There are differences in terms of what's available for control in the States. They have a lot more water-safe herbicides than we do, but we have one now, fortunately, since 2021. So how's it spreading? There was a really neat study came out of Quebec a few years ago, and it made the direct link between the spread of Phragmites through Quebec and the development of transportation corridors, so roads and rail lines and that. There was a study done on Lake Huron a few years ago. Karen Alexander, when she first worked for the Lake Huron Center for Coastal Conservation, and she basically had to map, her job was to map Phragmites along the shoreline from Sarnia all the way to Wyerton. And what she found was when there was a new cell just starting at the shoreline at the mouth of a creek, if she went up into the watershed, it was in a roadside ditch or an agricultural ditch. So it was starting up there and coming down to the water, to the lake. So this is how it's spreading. You go do your construction work, you put your equipment on the flatbed, and off you go to the next site. You don't clean it off. So not only is the drainage ditches for agriculture an issue for spread, but also it's impacting crop production. And so Ontario Federation of Agriculture, we've met with them several years ago, and they also have this on their radar as well to help get it out of these areas. This is another vector for spread. This is a problem on your shoreline. ATV users, there's not a lot of them, but they're doing a lot of damage. This is a globally rare ecosystem, very, very important in the world. And some people are using them as their personal recreational area with their ATVs. So they're not only doing a lot of damage to very rare plants and animals in the system, but spreading Phragmites all throughout it. So we have a really invasive plant. What are the concerns for humans? There are a lot, and these were actually significant issues for folks in Kincard, and also recreational opportunities. You can't see the lake, can't see the sunset, can't access the water. Impact for tourism, that is a big deal. Impact on the shoreline property values, that was a big deal here not too long ago. Damage to infrastructure, so it'll go through asphalt. That's what actually got the attention of the Ministry of Transportation. Fires, that's a huge issue where, particularly this time of year where you have a lot of that dry biomass, if it catches fire, really hot fires, and blocked view set intersections. There's been some horrific car accidents because of that. So liability issues. So this is the Kincardine shoreline not that long ago when we had that really high biomass growing out in the lake. Then you have a storm event, and the ice would rip it all out and wash it onto shore. So this would be your shoreline in the spring, and so municipality had paid to come and truck this away as well. The city of St. Thomas, the residents actually went to council with this issue. They had Phragmites on municipal land really close to homes, and they were quite concerned about the fire issue. And as a result of that, they formed a committee, and the municipality or the town of St. Thomas decided that we don't care whose property the Phragmites is on, we're going to pay to get rid of it. It was an exceedingly successful program. After about 6 years, they pretty much eradicated it through their whole city. Ministry of Transportation, this is Murray Purcell, when he worked for them, South Zone, he took this photo to their managers and said, look, maybe we can start dealing with it on our highways. And they are now on the MTO provincial highways. They have a program. This is how I became involved with Phragmites back in 2005, assessing this wetland down in Verona Provincial Park. It was just a sea of Phragmites everywhere, massive impacts. So I knew that we'd already lost a significant number of our wetland systems in Southern Ontario and the Great Lakes. And then we brought in this invasive plant that's taken over the habitat for a lot of our rare species. So it's, evident you lose the plants, of course, lose the diversity, but with that, you lose the insects, there's a big impact on birds and turtles and whatnot. There's a lot of studies coming out as well. So it's not just an impact on humans. So we have a problem with a plant. What are our ways of dealing with it? I'm just going to talk about these two mechanical. So we've been using cutting to drown, taking advantage of Lake Huron water levels increasing, and then the herbicide. There is a document out. I'm part of the Ontario Phragmites Working Group. I formed that group back in 2010. Co-chair, and a lot of our members helped populate this document. So back in 2012, record low levels, and then lakes started popping up, going up and up, up. And I knew cutting to drown could work. I knew there was this equipment in Sweden that they used to cut Phragmites through their Phragmites to open up channels. And so I was able through partners to get this one truckster. We now have 3, and basically we use it to go into these massive areas to clear out the Phragmites. It cuts it and it carries it out of the water. And then in these small areas, after the truckster's done their job, we can get the manual crew in there to deal with it, and even fine tune cut around the frag out amongst their native plants. We also use herbicides. I mentioned we have an aquatic safe herbicide that became available in Canada in 2021. We have not needed to use that yet in Kincardine, just so you know. So the herbicide application we use is the Dryland Weather Pro. And just with backpacks, we don't need the big machine that's in the picture there. So back when you had a significant issue on your shoreline, there was a lot of residents, particularly along Sunset Drive, that were quite upset about it. And so the poor Karen Kiefer and the mayor took a lot of, and whoever else was on council, and got an earful. But so residents were upset, but they also took matters into their own hands. Some of them I saw, there was evidence of people just going and using a herbicide on their own or cutting it, like doing some harmful practices. So I was asked to provide a guiding document, how best to deal with it. And the focus was this 19-kilometer shoreline from your northern boundary down to Scotts Point. And so what I did, I went and had a look at that whole area. Where was the Phragmites, and provided got an idea of what needed to be done in all those areas, and got a game plan together. So these are just some examples of what it looked like back then. You can see quite an expanse of the Phragmites itself, and variable densities, sparse in amongst your native plants, and then some really thick Phragmites. And as the lake levels increased, a lot more of it went into the water. It was wet. And so had to really balance between using the herbicide in the dry areas from the tree line out, and using the cutting to drown methods. So basically having that $30,000 annual budget was absolutely a godsend, because I knew what I had to work with. I would go every summer and I would assess and say, okay, where did we work last year? Let's see what the results were. Do we need the trucksters back? No, we can take the manual crew in here. Where do we need to apply the herbicide? And it worked exceedingly well. And so I would provide a report to Karen Kiefer, and I would say, okay, none of this work will happen until after Labor Day. That's reduced the impact on the seasonal residents and whatnot. She would post a notice in the local paper letting people know that we're going to be using herbicide. And I don't believe there was any complaints ever about that. No. So we would go then do the work. I'd recommend to Karen what we should do. She'd approve it. We'd go do the work, and then we'd provide a report at the end of the year. So as we were doing that, there was also an amazing group of volunteers in Kincardine here that were looking after that section of shoreline. Kincardine Residents Against Phragmites, the crap people, which they didn't know that was their acronym. I pointed out to them, but they had some areas that was just too much for them. So we went and controlled that as well in partnership with the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. And then they would also tell us of other areas that we weren't aware of outside of that 19-kilometer zone. So we would build that into our annual plan. So we would deal with it along trails, or some back creeks that was noticed, or out at the airport, and some of the roads as well. So for that 19-kilometer shoreline, I mentioned it's very globally rare ecosystem. It's really amazing ecosystem. So we did not take any track vehicles out there. All of that work was done by walking, backpack spraying. And then in the water, we had our truckster machines to cut and clear out the water. And as I mentioned, when we would go in and cut with the trucksters, the next year we did not need to use them again in a certain area. There was minimal regrowth, so the manual crew could just go in and fine tune, cut out. And the municipal guys were absolutely awesome, because that biomass had to go somewhere. So the trucksters would pile it on shore, and they would come and take it away. So here's just some example. This is the Brucedale Conservation of that campground. Those residents hadn't seen the lake in over 10 years. So when we started there in 2015, manually cutting, we cut a little open swath for them, and they had tears in their eyes. But that, if you go there now, this is what you see. Those residents are so appreciative, and they're actually controlling any regrowth at all that comes into that bay. This is that same embayment at the north end looking towards the campground, and you can just see it was just socked in with Phragmites. And today you wouldn't ever even known it was there. And so the cottagers outside of that campground are also controlling whatever little bit comes in there as well, which is fantastic. This is near the public beach area and what it looks like now. So again, a combination of the truxer work and the backpack spraying. This is a wetland system close to that campground. So lots of really rare plants and animals in here. We had to be very careful how we approached the control work. So the trucksters took all the thick stuff out. We had manual crews go in and do the sparser areas just so we weren't hurting any of the critters. This is me holding a snapper. Yeah, so if you're there, go there today, you wouldn't see any thick Phragmites. This the wetland restored. Concurrent to your program, there was one at Bruce Power going on. So they asked me to come and look at where's the Phragmites in the footprint of the security fence and then outside in the Bay de Dore coastal wetland. So I've been working with Bruce Power and OPG to restore that wetland system. And all of we're doing it the same way that we were doing Kincardine. All the thick Phragmites is now gone out of the lake. But in 2018, I went to Bruce Power and I said, you know, there's a large amount of Kincardine shoreline that we have to deal with. I'm concerned lake levels are going to start dropping. Again, can we use some of your funds to deal with some of the embayments close to the Bay de Dore? And they agreed to. So that was that one area where the cottagers there, they've been trying for years to get rid of this out of their shoreline. They're just so appreciative that they would have to do that. So when I go and assess, I meet a lot of these folks. So this is she was just so happy that the frag was out of her bay and gave her a little tool to deal with anything that regrew and a little postcard how to. So that embayment's all looked after as well now. The residents there are taking care of it. So what you're doing in Kincardine is actually happening elsewhere on the shoreline. So north of you, Saugeen Shores have a program, and then south of you here on Kinloss, which is really nice. So we've got that whole stretch of shoreline being controlled, which is great because you saw how frag can spread around. So if your neighbors aren't looking after it, it's going to just keep coming back in on the waves. And so this is really going to reduce your inoculation. I also want to mention, there's a clean equipment protocol that's available. Some municipalities are actually incorporating this into their tenders, their construction tenders, or in-house. So the guys, when they go out, or gals that go out and do the work, they clean their equipment. And that's also stopping other invasive plants as well. So it stops that whack-a-mole approach. I mentioned the Ministry of Transportation now have a major program going on. So your Highway 21 is being controlled. And there's this Green Shovels Collaborative. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this one at all, but this came about during the lockdown and COVID. All these agencies got together. So we have shovel ready jobs that can employ people. And what came out of that was a number of initiatives, Phragmites centric from the province that they're willing to pay. One was a strategic framework for the province, which we were involved with, a guiding document for municipalities to help them get on top of like how to plan for Phragmites. A lot of municipalities haven't started yet. A Northern Ontario strategy, which also helped with. There was a cost benefit analysis. What happens? What's the cost if you don't control Phragmites? And then working to secure funding to help support. So there is some funding available, up to $10,000 for municipalities. It's not a lot, but it's something. If you want to know more about this program, there's a webinar provided at the Ontario Families Working Group meeting last year or this year. When I do my assessments, I also see a lot of other impacts on your shoreline. And I'm just pointing this one out because this was in the year after the high water level. The residents removed the woody vegetation or the vegetation on the municipality's shoreline. And as a result, there was nothing there to protect the shoreline from wave action. You'll see where all the vegetation was left, the rock didn't have to be put in. But because it was all removed, the wave action was coming and threatening the roads. And I'd already mentioned ATV use. It is it's a big concern for myself personally. You know, here's this sign saying, no ATVs, sensitive habitat, and there's the trail right through. Some of the local residents are quite upset, so they've been blocking these trails, and then the ATVers just make a new one. So no one's really checking on to make sure that these areas are being protected. So I mentioned all the high density frag now has gone from your shoreline. If you were to drive along Sunset, you would see no evidence of it. There's one photo of it at the campground there at Brucedale. So it might be nice to put up a before picture just to remind folks, but also to educate. But here's the thing, like lake levels are dropping. We aren't done yet. Like there's still remnant pockets. It's so critical to stay on that, because if we don't, then we're going to get back to a mess again. So there's that piece of it. And also then what about where it's out just near the shore in the back of wetland areas, which it is? What do we do with that? Do we leave it? We shouldn't, because it's your investment to date will then be threatened. So in areas where this works well, it's a watershed approach. It's your whole municipality and how to deal with it. And then, you know, there's other things that can be happening. I mentioned there's some sections of your shoreline where the locals are just looking after it. Once you've dealt with the massive frag, they're keeping it clean. They don't ever want to see it back. But there's pockets there where that's not happening. So how can we build a program to ensure that those areas are looked after by the community? I know they're interested, but how do we build that capacity? In-house cleaning the construction equipment and also your tenders, so you don't keep spreading it around, or other companies don't bring it in from elsewhere into your communities. There was an environmental committee that was from pre-COVID, and maybe looking into reestablishing that to look at not only Phragmites, other problematic invasive, but also other issues that you may be and seeing on your shoreline and natural areas. And then I mentioned the funding piece. A few years ago, you were successful in getting funding from provincial grants, and so there is opportunities to support your program as well. So I just make mention of that. This, I think, is our next Phragmites. If we'd only known about frag in the 1970s and 80s before it took off, you know, hindsight's 2020. But this is Miscanthus silvergrass. I've seen it near Goderich. It's out competing Phragmites on Highway 402. I've been watching this for a number of years now. So, you know, if it outcompetes frag, it's a problematic plant. It's actually off the 400. I've seen it going there. It's more of a likes drier areas, but if you have this in your municipality, I'd highly recommend just nailing it now. Anyway, I've thrown a lot of information at you. I know the previous presentation, I had a lot more photos as well. And there's lots of resources out there for you as well. And I'm always happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Dr. Gilbert, thank you so much. Are there any questions from council members regarding this report? Councillor. We'll go to Councillor Steinhoff Gray and then Councillor Pranger. You're muted, Amanda.
Thank you. I owe a quarter. Miss the thing that is out silver. I missed the top of it.
Silvergrass,
Silvergrass. Thank you.
They sell it in the nurseries.
I was actually, it was kind of leading into actually one of my other questions, which was, I'm just curious because you said it was out competing Phragmites, which is a terrifying concept given how robust Phragmites is. Does it respond to the same kind of methodology for destruction of?
Oh, yeah, excellent question. So as I mentioned, it likes drier feet. So the cutting to drown you'd never see it in the wet areas, but a herbicide definitely. So if you're spraying Phragmites, like that photo I showed, just make sure the chemical gets on all of the plants, regardless of their frag. Like, yeah, it would kill both. Yeah, the chemical we use for Phragmites would kill silvergrass. Yes.
And just a follow up to that, because you mentioned the chemical. One of the things I found interesting in your first presentation, I don't know if it was cut from the second one, but you mentioned two herbicides that they use in the States, the rodeo and the habitat. And they the way they impact, the enzymes aren't present in humans and wildlife, which makes it kind of safer to use. So is that the equivalent of the drug that, or drug chemical that's now available in Canada? You mentioned a new chemical that's available that might make it safer for the other habitats that we're dealing with in our spraying, or is it only used with aquatic presence?
Yes, so the dryland equivalent of Habitat Aqua would be Arsenal Powerline. The active ingredient is imazapyr, so that's different active ingredient than what's in the Weather Pro. I'm very careful using that product because it'll kill a mature tree. It's really good at what it does. It's meant to kill plants and it does. So we use it at a lower concentration and I'm very careful where I use it. My preference is the Weather Pro, just because I've seen the native plant recovery using that product. But that's, I mean, I'm just so grateful that BASF actually went to the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, Health Canada, to get this aquatic safe herbicide for us, because otherwise we've been working with our hands tied behind our back. And as the lake levels drop now in the shallow water, we can't use cutting to drown methods. We need to use that herbicide. Did
Thank
that
you.
answer your question?
Yes, it absolutely did. Thank you.
Councillor Pranger, please.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for your presentation and the fantastic work you've done. I actually worked for the Conservation Authority when Phragmites sort of became a bigger issue, and I was like, what are we gonna do? It wasn't my job, but I was even with them, I was like, how are you guys gonna address this? Because I actually do look at our area on a watershed basis. And if you want to look at just the Penetangor watershed, it's not the whole Saugeen Valley, but that just affects Kincardine. Like you said, it's all over the place. And looking at your map and your presentation, all the little red dots, I guess my question goes to that. How far does Phragmites travel either via air or in the water through the streams? Because I see even more dots along the American side of our Great Lakes. Can it travel through the lakes? I don't know the water patterns. I guess it's not going to go upstream, obviously, but do we have to worry about them not doing anything, or are we just more localized, worrying about our neighbors not doing
Yeah, no, excellent questions. So the seeds, I saw a study, Mount Vesuvius, the volcanic eruption, and the first plant to get established again was Phragmites, and the closest patch the scientists found was 40 kilometers away. But we know the wind, with these winds, like those seeds can travel. The great thing about Phragmite seeds, that like if they don't sprout this spring, they're not going to sprout. So that's a blessing. Unlike some of like cattail will be viable for 100 years. But to your point, the more we get our neighbors controlling it, particularly on the roads, like if you can get the county and the municipality and the MTO all have the same contractor, so they don't pull up their boom when they get to a county road, or because they're just doing a municipal, like if we can get them working together, that's a huge efficiency and also savings. But there's a great program going on with Asaba Bayfield Conservation Authority with Huron Kinloss, where their crews will go out and they'll backpack spray along the roads. And it's great because they can take advantage of the best weather days. They know what crops are there, what wind directions, when they need to go that road. So it's a much more efficient way of dealing with it as well, close by. But for the Great Lakes, like the Americans have been dealing with this plant longer than we have in Ontario. But when I first joined that Great Lakes Phragmites Collaborative, I was the only person from Canada, Ontario on that group. And what I learned from them, they were throwing millions of dollars at their issue. They weren't looking at the watershed scale. They were working in isolation, this wetland here, and not looking at the roads, not looking at their neighbors. And so I quickly clicked into that and understood the nature of this plan doesn't matter whose property it's on or the boundaries, right? That's why that watershed approach works so well. So it'll come down a river to the lake. So that's why it's important to get it up in the watershed, right, along the river banks and whatnot. And off of the road. The roads, I would say the roads and the agriculture, those are easy to get at. It's when you get into these backwater areas, it's hard to access, and that's the tough part, right? So that's why it's so good to get it off the roads. Sorry.
Councillor Kavanaugh, you have a question, please.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, I just have a bit of a comment. I want to congratulate you wholeheartedly because earlier this evening, we've heard lots of talk about working together with other municipalities and crossing borders, and the fact that issues transcend these lines on a map. And here you are presenting to us something that, you know, has been a decade in the making, and we're seeing actual successes. Your before and after pictures speak for themselves. This is fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. And you-
Councillor Hin, oh, I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, your worship. I would like to say, I give a lot of presentations. And I always mention what you guys do here as a model for other areas, because to have your, that vision that you had for that set budget, like I said, it's been a godsend to have that, to know that's not going to be pulled, that we can actually keep doing the job that we need to do. And I always put you on the map, just so you know, for your program, because it really is a model for other municipalities.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you through you, Mayor. Thank you for coming tonight. It's invigorating, actually, and contagious to listen to somebody who talks passionately about something. So thanks for that. Actually, I have a question for Karen. There was a slide in there that had a number of recommendations in it related to things like procurement, et cetera, stuff like that. I was just quickly looking through the staff report. I want to like ensure that will council be expecting to see something from staff that's looking for our approval to implement some of these recommendations related to construction, et cetera, that can help in this effort? Thanks.
Through Mayor Craig, I think that'll require some interdepartment conversations regarding tenders and construction companies. With infrastructure and development, for example, they do more of those tenders, but things like community engagement, the grant that Janice talked about, certainly we can explore those options and bring information back or be part of future information reports. Is that what you meant, Councillor Hinchberger?
Yes, thank you. I was kind of deciding in my mind whether I actually need a motion or not to actually have community services prepare a report that looks at the feasibility of implementing the recommendations that were provided.
Perhaps I would refer you to our clerk who could help preparing one for another council meeting, but not for tonight.
Or I made eye contact with Jane over there that looks to me to indicate, no, not required, we got it. But I'll wait to.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, some of those recommendations can be done strictly through our operating budget. But I can also share with council that we're taking the next step to get staff trained so that they can enhance and leverage the great program that Dr. Gilbert has done, so that we can also provide the spraying mechanisms at the right time of the year and the right winds and the right locations, so that we're not always reliant on Janice and her crew, that we also have those resources in-house as well.
Councillor Kennedy, please.
Yeah, through the chair, I just want to thank Karen Kiefer and all the work that she's did with it, and the doctor knows all well where it started a long time ago and where we've got it. So she deserves a lot of credit for this direction too. Thank you.
Councillor Steinhoff Gray.
Through you, Chair, I had one question. There were a couple of suggestions that were put into that report by way of bylaws that would prevent residents from planting exotic species, because I know that was one of the areas where some of these things get established. Did we actually put in any bylaws around the planting of exotic species? I was just wondering.
Which staff person would like to ponder that one for a moment? I'm gonna guess no, but the staff might want to not spend a whole lot of time, but just
Yeah.
Director, please.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, it's monitoring a program like that is extremely difficult to do, but one of the things that we can do is through an education process. So we recognize the fact that we have a lot of invasive species in areas such as ditches, the waterfronts, and all good intentions of residents wanting to plant species, but maybe not necessarily being familiar with what is deemed an invasive species. I can tell you too, we typically see that concurrence occurring in the fall when people are cleaning out their flower pots and thinking they're doing a good job by putting those species in the back of their properties or close to woodland. And all of a sudden, 10 years later, we've got such as periwinkle growing through woods, which is an invasive species as an example. So I feel that it's more of an education program that we could certainly endorse and continue to to educate our residents and our visitors on plants and how to dispose of them. So hopefully that answers your question somewhat, but it's certainly a bigger problem than most people realize, but monitoring it is always a difficult process. I think that a better approach would be through an education program.
Thank you.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you through the chair. Sorry to drag this on longer. I will echo everyone else that it's quite amazing to see the before and after pictures. They really showcase the work and to thank you for the CRAP group and all their hard work. The thing that I was thinking about when Councillor Hitchberger was speaking about our own potential internal policies is, there's been requests come or information come from our different teams that they're working on cleaning out drainage ditches or all the requests we've had recently for municipal drains and looking at it from an entire wetland system. Like, is that something that we should be, working really with our staff to understand how to, when they are cleaning out a drainage ditch, to alert if there are Phragmites to prevent downstream? And is that something that can exist within the existing budget? Is that something that we need to look at bringing, a motion forward to encourage staff to do that or to put it into a policy? There's a lot of questions, I think, in there. Apologies.
Yeah. So with respect to maintenance on a municipal drain, you would have your drainage superintendent who will be familiar with the issues related to Phragmites and also contractors who are informed about the issue. And so the clean out that we contract with those companies for that work will be familiar with the issues of Phragmites across Ontario. So I wouldn't expect that would be something that you need any particular motion with respect to. Regular ditch clean out, that probably we could speak with the Director of Infrastructure and Development, but his staff are one of the ones that has already assisted in doing some of the work with the cleanup. So I would hazard a guess that his response would be that they're aware of that issue and the issue it causes for road drainage work just in general.
Councillor Hinchberger,
Thank you
please.
through your mayor. I just want to follow up on Councillor Steinhoff's question. And it's probably the CAO would be best positioned to answer this. The Director of Community Services referred to this idea about invasive plant species and about how the best way to approach it might be through community outreach and education. I'm just wondering, does a municipality have the legislative authority to say regulate nurseries in its geographical boundary in terms of what they sell, thinking about this principle?
I don't think we would. There's a list of invasive species that OMAFRA puts out, not like noxious weeds that are required for landowners to deal with, but I don't know that there would be, I don't know, I would have to investigate that. I would suggest though, in our notes, perhaps in our spring and fall newsletter, we can put some information out there to the public with respect to just an education program.
Yeah, if I may, any municipality can add to the noxious weed list. So you can put Phragmites on there, you can put whatever plant you want if you're so inclined. But there are implications with that, as you all know. There's to follow up and actually implement the control. The other piece for greenhouses, there's a really great program called Grow Me Instead. And this comes from the Ontario Invasive Plant Council. And they've been working with the nurseries to try and reduce these really problematic plants being sold, or to educate the public to maybe buy a native plant of equivalent structure, format, forms. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Gilbert, thank you so much for further educating the council on the joys and challenges of Phragmites. I think the easiest thing is to give Phragmites commercial value, and it'll be gone in like 3 years. But as soon as it's profitable, it'll disappear. Anyway, Council is going to now engage in a 5-minute break. Mr. LaBelle, that seems rude to you, but council will be much more engaged if you all stand up and go for a 5-minute walk. Well, that will be up for council to determine. We are recording, so just be aware. At this point, welcome back to the Committee of the Whole meeting for the Municipality of Kincardine. I'd like to welcome Stefan Labelle, Manager of Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit, to provide his presentation as part of our orientation progress. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, is it Stefan or Stephen?
Just don't call me Stephanie.
Mr. LaBelle, thank you for being here this evening to continue. Carry on. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit is your local specialized public transit partnership serving the mentally and physically challenged residents of Erin, Elderslie, Brockton, Chatsworth, Grey Highlands, Hanover, Huron-Kinloss, Kincardine, Saugeen Shores, Southgate, and West Grey. This covers more than 5,000 square kilometers, the largest geographical transit area in Ontario, and I'm told the second largest in Canada. SMART is also a registered Canadian charity. Donations are gratefully received and tax receipts are issued for all donations. SMART provides safe, dependable, and affordable transportation solutions to individuals and groups for medical appointments, employment opportunities, shopping, and social outings. Saugeen Mobility has a fleet of 20 vehicles and 19 drivers. The fleet includes nine passenger accessible buses, 10 accessible minivans, and one 30-passenger accessible bus. 3 9-passenger accessible buses will be added to the fleet in 2023 to replace 3 aging vehicles. Individual user fees are currently $2 plus 55 cents per kilometer, with a $7.50 minimum per ride. Waiting time is charged at $22 per hour. Out of area rides, or where a vehicle and driver are deemed to be chartered, are charged at 55 cents per kilometer plus $22 per hour from the time the vehicle arrives at the client's residence until the client is done with the vehicle. There are no deadhead charges. Deadhead charges are those related to the passengerless vehicle getting to and from the client's residence. A ride is defined as one person going from point A to point B. A return trip is 2 rides. As per the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, each client may have a companion or attendant ride free of charge. As well, extra stops between destinations points are counted as rides since there is a charge for them. In the view of the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, public transit services are a municipal responsibility. The Government of Ontario, however, provides funding to all transit systems in the province to support their operations through the Ministry of Transportation's dedicated gas tax funds for public transportation program. Funds under this program are paid based on population and ridership data from 2 calendar years prior. For example, March 2022 funding was based on 2020 statistics. In keeping with MTO methodology, municipal contributions are calculated annually with a 30% weight applied to population and a 70% weight applied to ridership. This overall contribution percentage or share is then applied to the total municipal contribution to give the amount due from each municipality. The town of Hanover acts as SMART's host municipality for the purpose of receiving and holding in trust this dedicated gas tax funding until such time as it is used for capital purchases, operational deficits, or other projects deemed to be improvements to the transit service in accordance with MTO guidelines and criteria. Now let's get on with Kincardine. Currently, Kincardine has 282 active clients. In 2022, clients from Kincardine took 2,142 rides compared to 2,003 rides in 2021. Number of rides are steadily going back to pre-pandemic numbers, where, for example, there were 4,022 rides in 2018 for Kincardine. Kincardine's share of the 2023 contribution is 85,955, up from 81,966 in 2022 and up from $74,967 in 2021. For local taxpayers, SMART represents a tremendous value when compared to other specialized public transit services. SMART serves a population of more than 100,000 people, which makes it one of 21 services in Ontario serving populations of 50 to 150,000. Compared to its peer group, SMART continues to be chronically underfunded by its municipal partners. This underfunding means that SMART is far more dependent on the gas tax for transit program for operational costs than its peers. The effect of this is that SMART may have difficulty purchasing new vehicles in the future, since most MTO funding will be spent on operational expenses. For those who use and depend on SMART, this is a service that is highly valued. The service provided by SMART helps to keep the most vulnerable members of your community independent, mobile, and involved. Many studies have shown a direct link between mobility and good health, both physical and mental. Medically related rides constitute an estimated 36% of the rides supplied by SMART. The remaining rides are for social outings, shopping, and work-related transportation. Municipal services like SMART are not simply expenditures, they are investment in building communities. People no longer just live where they were raised or work, they live where they can find the life balance they want. Public services, especially municipal services, are a large part of that equation. If the services they want or need are not available in a particular community, they will choose or perhaps be forced to live somewhere else where those services are available. The population of Canada, especially in rural areas, is aging, as you no doubt know. There will only be increasing demand for this type of service over the next few decades. According to statistics from the 2021 census, both Grey and Bruce counties had 26% of their population aged 65 and older. This compares to 18.5% for the province of Ontario as a whole. The average age of the population in Bruce County is 45 years old, and in Grey County, it is 46 years old, compared to 42 years old provincially. Luckily, the provincial government recognizes this fact and appears very interested in transportation issues, especially in rural areas. In response to these demographics, communities in Grey and Bruce have been adding a considerable number of new housing units for their aging residents. A safe, dependable, and affordable transportation service for those residents is going to be a critical part of their quality of life and their being able to remain independent for as long as possible. If you have further questions, my details are available, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Councillor Kennedy, please.
Yeah, no, thanks, Stefan. I'm 3 meetings into this committee, still learning, but I've learned that they went through some challenges, over the last few years, and they've got some great leadership here, and they've got some great people around that table that I'm at meetings with that bring a lot of experience and have the vision to see that we can maybe change and do some little things better. And one of the things that I've been talking to Stefan about and the committee is a charter, that we're working on right now, where after hours, we can still move people around that need this service. So that's something that we're hoping in the next couple of months, that probably, we'll have a price and availability and different things. So I'm kind of excited about just some new things that we're going to try to change and listen to the public and, then figure out the hours if they work in each community the same as we have them now, and the pluses and minuses. So I just really think that's important. That things that we're working on right now. So thank you.
Deputy Mayor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you for your presentation. I think there's probably consensus that SMART is invaluable. I'm pleased to hear that the numbers in terms of rider usage has increased and we're getting up to pre-pandemic levels. So there's the hope that we will expand the scope. I do have some questions. I think in your presentation, you were stating that the Kincardine contribution, the municipality's contribution was about 85,000, which was up.
That's correct.
Is that presumably there's 9 partners, if I'm correct, and presumably each partner is given or provided with what their contribution is for that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Sorry. There's 9 partners, is that right?
There's 10 partners.
Okay. And is it my understanding correct that each partner is effectively given what their contribution should be for that respective year?
Yes.
Why is it then that SMART is so underfunded?
Simply because municipalities historically have wanted to minimize as much as possible the contribution they gave. It's really a reason of trying to save money.
Okay. My second question perhaps on this point is, in light of sort of the accessibility sort of action plan that's being rolled out in 2025, is there an on-demand service that's going to be relevant to SMART?
Is there an on-demand service?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what we do. Yeah.
And so how will that look in 2025, I guess, when the action plan is fully
That
in place?
could be related to the study that the CAO is doing through his chief of transportation. There may be a recommendation to combine Gray and Bruce counties so that the funding would come from the county level. And there could be a amalgamation of services between SMART and there's other companies in Owen Sound that we could amalgamate and create a service for both counties. That's what it could look like in 2025.
Thank you.
Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Yeah, I had one question. It's probably on a similar thought, but you had mentioned that you're chronically underfunded and rely heavily on the gas tax for operational as opposed to fleet replacement. I was just curious, you'd mentioned you'd purchased some new vehicles. Do you know when we would realize that risk where our fleet is not usable and we have no mechanism for replacement? I'm just curious, like how short-term or long-term that risk realization is.
We're within, I would say, 3 to 4 years of being unable to continue our operations if funding doesn't come to the company for purchasing new vehicles. Our vehicles are on average 6 years old, and the average number of kilometers is about 250,000 kilometers on the vehicles. So we maintain them every 5,000 kilometers. We spend a lot of money on maintenance. And yeah, I would say within 4 years, if we don't start seeing some money from the government, and I'm talking about the federal government here, because there used to be a program whereby they would provide funding for us to purchase vehicles, but that funding has dried up and should restart perhaps in 2025.
Councillor Blackwood, please.
Thank you through the chair. I know many people that rely on this service and, as the report kind of mentioned, it's not like a nice to have, it's essential for folks in our community, all folks to be able to get around. I guess one of my questions is around
as a charitable status or as a transportation provider. I know there's eligibility requirements for your service, but in terms of looking at potential other revenue sources, are there opportunities to provide service to municipalities that may purchase it and expand the use for like a specific day or for specific purposes, or like for something like income-based?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking right now at a menu of services that I have to present in 2 months to the board. However, right now, that menu of services will be based on eligibility. So if you're mentally or cognitively challenged, still, we used to provide transportation to anyone at any time, 365 days a year. But at some point, we realized that funding was going to dry up. We would have to fold. So we started bringing in some eligibility rules. Yeah.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, and thank you for coming tonight. I'm looking at the paragraph that talks about ridership in 2021 and 2022, and then it makes comparison to 2018. Given the number of, I'm trying to get a sense of perspective here, given the number of drivers that you have and the vehicles you have, and I know you'd have to probably estimate it a bit because not every ride is the same duration. How many rides do you think you're capable of handling with your existing fleet and personnel?
In 2018, we provided 35,000 rides. That was pre-pandemic. And that was $38,000 rides for the whole year for all 9 municipalities. Then we added Grey Highlands. I would say that back then we had more vehicles. So in order for us to get back to that type of level or to go even higher, we'd have to hire more drivers and purchase more vehicles. But we can go as high as we want, as long as we hire drivers and vehicles.
What I was trying to get in my mind was how capable is the system of getting close to helping to fund itself if it was like maximally used by everybody? I don't have a great sense of idle time and where this fits in and economies of scheduling and stuff like that. I know it's a tough question. It is a tough question.
I think your question is related to the work that I'm going to be doing over the next 2 months, coming up with a menu of services. I have to be able to, over the next 2 months, stress test the company to see how far we could go to maximize the service. There are issues right now around availability of drivers and vehicles during the day. You have individuals going to day programs. So there are intense hours. So between 7:30 and 9:30 and between 3:30 and 4:30, let's say. In between those times, there's not much demand. So how do you create demand? How do you maximize the use of the vehicles? And that's something that's a bit of a tough question.
Sorry, I actually had a thought on that, which was just trying to think outside the box, is recognizing that the priority should always be there to support those who are mentally and physically challenged. Is there a possibility to open up the service to people outside of that during these lull periods, which in turn could help generate revenue, which could help to support the whole thing?
The short answer to your question is yes, we can. We just have to modify the bylaws for the organization.
Would it affect the charitable status at all? That's the one thing I looked at as possibly a barrier to doing that.
I don't have the answer to that question. I'm sorry.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Stephen, how long you been the manager of Soggy Mobility?
Since last July.
Okay, because I'm a little confused here, and I think that, some of the older counselors, there was a program about 2 years ago to incentivize them and give them quite a bit of cash other than our donations. And there was a grant coming in from the government, I think through the gas, to modernize your fleet. And we're talking $2 or $3 million. So I'm a little surprised when you start talking about your fleet being 6 years old. I'm going to have to go back to my notes and maybe back to Dave and ask him, because I'm a little confused. What happened to that grant? What happened to all that money that we were going to modernize the fleet about 2 years ago?
Yeah, we were able to purchase 9 vehicles over the course of 3 years. Each vehicle puts about 50 to 60,000 kilometers on it every year. So the vehicles age quite rapidly. But we have a fleet of 20 vehicles. So on average, the average age is about 6 years.
Just to follow up, so I'm a little bit offended because you're saying the municipalities weren't helping you. We actually gave more than our quota for that program, and we were 100% behind it. And I believe the other 9 municipalities did too. So let's be careful. I mean, if you need money, you got to present it. And a lot of times we will come through for you because we did it during that program. Thank you.
Mr. LaBelle, thank you very much for coming to update us on the work that Saugeen Mobility is doing. As other councillors have commented, we do appreciate your presence in our municipality. Thanks
You're
very much.
welcome. Thank you.
All right, moving into reports, we have the Corporate Services 2022 year-end capital review. Clerk, please, would you please read this resolution for us?
Moved by Beth Blackwell, seconded by Bill Stewart, that committee of the whole recommend that council authorize the reserve and reserve fund transfers totaling $336,205 as summarized in the attached 2022 summary of reserve and reserve fund transfer schedule.
Okay, welcome. Ms. Baumann, thank you for being here tonight. If you could give us an overview of this resolution, please.
Okay, thank you. So through you, Chair, the purpose of this report is to obtain council's authorization for reserve fund transfers that were exceeded the overall budget for 2022 capital projects, but as well as to provide information on the status of the 2022 capital projects, as well as any cost savings that were realized. So just to summarize, there were 23 projects that were completed under budget, totaling $673,000, and there were 13 projects completed over budget by $336,000, and there were 44 projects that have been carried forward to 2023. Overall, there's a net savings of $336,812 for the completed capital projects of 2022. There is a detailed spreadsheet provided in the attachment, and there's plenty of information provided in the report as well. We need council's authorization for these approvals in order to finalize the year end and update our general ledger accounts. And the attached spreadsheet provides the summary of the overall amounts that are required to be transferred from reserve funds, and again, netting $336,000. So staff is requesting that council authorize the attached reserve fund transfers.
So this is presented per our financial records policy, financial practices policy that we have, is it? This falls within the policy framework of the Treasury Department.
Yes, through you, Chair, it overlapped multiple different policies, like the reserve fund policy, the procurement policy, and then the budget as well.
All right, you've heard the motion. Is there any further discussion regarding this? Councillor Blackwell, please. Councillor Stewart, please.
It's unfortunate that this sort of came at almost 2.5 hours because this is really the business part of the business. So I'm a little disappointed by that through you, Mayor. I do have some questions that we're basically going to okay this tonight. So it's sort of, this will be on our year-end budget, right? But it doesn't really close off 22 capital projects. We still have a lot of capital projects, 21, 22, and even one in 20. And I see one in 2019, which I think you did an excellent job in your spreadsheet. And you and I were talking that we probably need to keep that spreadsheet going because we have seemed to inundate the staff with capital projects and we're really a little bit behind. So what happens to those projects that were slotted in 2000, 2021, 2022? I know we're going to close the books, But how do we justify those as we move forward? Because some of them will be over and some of them will be under. So we'll just include that in the 2023 sort of financial reports.
So through you, Chair, so there are multiple projects that do naturally carry over into multiple years. So that's one aspect of it. At the year end of 2022, we take all of the costs that have been incurred up until December 31st. And for those projects, open or closed, we transfer those amounts that have been expended out of the reserve funds. For any ongoing projects, there will be additional costs incurred in 2023, even if they're 2022 and prior projects. And we usually, a couple of times throughout the year, we transfer those. We take a look at all of our spending for the capital projects at June 30th. And then again at September 30th typically is what we do. We provide further reports to council on that. And then we'll take those spends and we'll transfer the reserve fund monies out of there as well. So it happens multiple times per year.
Follow-up question. Project 9464, which is the Queen Street Sewer Main Replacement Engineering. I know that we had it in the budget, 114,000 in 2021, but we seem to have a total cost at the end of last year, December 31st, of 190,000, and we're over budget by about 77,000, which is almost like 60%. I don't remember okaying that. I mean, how did that sort of come be? It missed us because usually I believe in capital projects, there's a discretionary about 10% override, and after that, it's got to come back to council for approval. Is that correct?
So through you, Chair. So the staff have the authority to approve overages in the amount of $50,000, provided there's transfers within the current, or there's allotment within the current budget. So they can, if there's cost savings, as this report shows, there's cost savings in one area, they can offset those costs with other areas. But I did have a conversation with the Director of Infrastructure and Development on this particular issue. There was a report, I believe, that was brought forward to council regarding additional works that were required for this project, and that included the consultation with the public, as well as some of the streetscape elements that were not originally considered when this project was first approved. So the report, the information was presented to council. There were just no costs associated with that. So that was the reasoning for that overage there.
Thank you. Yeah, because I agree. We talked about the streetscape and we talked about everything, but we didn't talk about a number. So I think you're absolutely right. That needed to be have a conversation with them because that was way over 50,000. And we want to make sure that we sort of checks and balances with these things, and I appreciate it. Other than that, the last question I would have is your report. The last report is excellent. That's the big chart and everything, which starts showing all the projects and all the capital projects. I'd really like to keep that going for this year and sort of keep it with the 2002 and prior year projects and not bring the 2023, because it sort of gives us an indication how we're doing. Because what I'm getting worried about is that we might be overloading the staff between operational responsibility and capital projects. I don't want to see us getting too far behind on the capital projects because, you know, sometimes we might need to cancel them or relook at them and everything else, especially when they're getting 12 months to 24 months old. So I just want to make sure, if you don't mind, keeping that report and hoping it's not going to take too much, and maybe you can update it in July or something on a quarterly basis if it's not going to cost the staff too much, and then we can take a look. As we still have 44 projects that are ongoing from 2022, and some of them, yes, I know some of the larger projects like Queen Street and everything else can take 2 or 3 years, but some of these are very small projects. So just want to make sure we get them captured in 2023. Thank you.
So we've heard the motion. All in favor of recommending that we authorize the reserve and reserve funds as summarized in the table. All in favor? Yes. Anyone opposed? That's carried. Draft asset retirement obligations policy. Clerk, please.
Moved by Jennifer Pranger, seconded by Mike Hinchberger, that committee of the whole recommend that council adopt the draft asset retirement obligations policy as presented in report 2023-09.
Director, please.
Okay, thank you. So through you, Chair. So staff is bringing forward this new policy that was developed in order to provide guidance for the accounting treatment of asset retirement obligations, as well as to establish the roles and responsibilities for the various municipal departments. This is a new standard, Public Sector Standard 3280 for asset retirement obligations, and for municipalities, this will come into effect for the fiscal year ending 2023. So we have established a working group with with Bruce County as well as the lower tiers, and we're working on implementation of this new guideline. And the first step of that implementation is to put forward a policy and have it approved by council. This, just for your awareness, the policy has been approved by our auditors. They've reviewed it and had no issues with it. As well as for your information, we have also had staff attend various MFOA educational sessions that was also hosted in partnership with KPMG. So we have attended those training sessions, and this policy has been drafted with those best practices in mind. So staff is asking approval of the attached policy.
You've heard the motion. Are there any questions? Councillor Stewart, please.
Yes, as you're well aware through you, Chair, that we actually own a couple of companies, one 100%, the other one's very minor. I think it's 13.48%, which I believe that are councillors on the board. But do we have to treat those the same way as we treat? I assume we do. So when they retire, we have to bring it over to our paper and our books and everything. So we treat everything all the same.
So through you, Chair, that's actually a question that the group of us had a discussion about, because each entity, each public sector entity would be responsible for doing those calculations and for developing their own policies. And then that information would then be consolidated with our financial statement. So the onus would be on those entities to develop their own policies and do their own calculations.
Heard the resolution. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Enforcement of bylaws agreement, OPP. Clerk, please.
Moved by Andrea Clark, seconded by Rory Kavanagh, that committee of the whole recommend that council enter into an enforcement bylaws agreement with the Ontario Provincial Police as outlined in report clerks 2023-06.
Would you like to speak to this?
As part of the OPP services agreement between the province of Ontario and the municipality of Kincardine, the OPP shall provide enforcement of mutually agreed upon bylaws. This is to supplement the enforcement done by the municipal zone bylaw enforcement officers. Since 2021, the municipality has entered into an annual agreement with the OPP regarding the enforcement of certain bylaws. This agreement expired on December 31st, 2022, and a new agreement has been negotiated with the OPP for council's consideration.
For the resolution, are there any questions? All in favor of the resolution? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Very good. County Council update. Oh, there was D. I'm sorry. Yes, 7.D, the report regarding the Davidson Center correspondence that we had received. Director, would you, there is a motion, it's just to add to it. Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I'm not really looking for a resolution or anything. I'm just trying to basically, I think it's important that we open this up to the public. So maybe what we can ask either the CEO or the Director of Community Services, maybe give an update of what we've been hearing about through emails. I think it's important to discuss this in a public forum. So either one of you would like to take it on, because I don't know the details at all. Thank you.
Perhaps I would direct that to our director over there. Give us the, there will be some details that we shouldn't talk about, can't talk about, but there's the broad picture of events and whether or not one of the concerns that was raised earlier by Coupler 3 was, do we have the policies in place that we need so that staff can do what they need to do? We are concerned of the well-being of our staff, well-being of our facilities, and if you could speak to that as part of your conversation, Director, would be appreciated.
Yes, and thank you for the question. I'm not privy to what emails you've received, so I'm sorry, I don't know all of the details that you've received, but for the most part, a quick synopsis is that there was some damage done to the Davidson Center last week. that staff have been working with our OPP service to mitigate and to rectify some of the issues, which we recognize is far more than just the vandalism. Staff's working with the local school board to see if we can come up with some conclusions. And I've also reached out to our local ministry consultant to see if there's some opportunities to talk about our youth-friendly community, which I understand this community registered for in 2017. I do ask council if, since this is quite impromptu, if I could have the opportunity to provide a more in-depth report back to council so that you have it for the purposes of the public as well.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you. Just to help you in preparation of that report, I've got some strong opinions on the subject, but I don't know all the facts. If I wondered if when the report is, to the extent that you can lay things out in a chronological fashion in terms and including like who was involved. And the other would be is this address the general subject about whether we have a policy and whether the public nuisance bylaw in effect was a policy that was applicable under this circumstance and how the municipality initially responded. So if you could just ensure that those included in your report.
Deputy Mayor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Just following on, I don't know that we can include who is involved, but I mean, do you mean the general sense of whether the demographics were students or young people? Is that what you?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. It seems that, and I think the email that Councillor Stewart might, I wouldn't want to put words in his mouth, might have been referring to, which would be in the communication that was sent to council over the last days of last week. But I've become like privy to some information that's been shared to me, like even today about, say, the role of the OPP detachment in this that I really wasn't kind of aware of, and in terms of how they actually advised staff. So I have a lot of doubts about whether I actually have a clear picture of what went on and when and who was involved. Yeah, it really has nothing to do with, very little to do, I think, with those who might have carried out this and more the response to it. Thanks.
We will leave that in your capable hands. Thank you. All right, just a procedural question for, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Councillor Steinhoff, great question.
Through you, Chair. I know the details will come out in the report, but I just want to confirm that we uphold a zero tolerance for any harassment of the staff that are at that Davidson Center. So just so that I have peace of mind that we're supporting our staff in those positions, I would like to know even before the report that we've taken every action we could to ensure that they are not subject to harassment in their roles.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. As I was commenting, a procedural issue for council's consideration. We do have a closed session planned for this evening regarding the issue on the closed session. And we need to determine whether or not you would prefer the CAO to ask our legal team to stay online to advise, or would it be your preference to reschedule? We can finish the agenda that we have here and address the closed session at a subsequent meeting. The one question I would have is what we're dealing with time sensitive, or is it more open-ended?
I don't believe that it is something that is needing to be dealt with immediately, but it is information where I think direction from council as to how they wish to proceed will be helpful in the near future.
We could have that session in 2 weeks and it wouldn't adversely affect our decision or the outcome. So we need some direction from council whether or not you would prefer to continue on through or reschedule, particularly the closed session. Councillor Stewart, please.
Through you, Mayor, procedurally, asking the clerk, can we go into close right now?
You would need to adjourn from committee of the whole, go back into council. And then you wouldn't come back to committee of the whole, you would have adjourned it, and then you would go to closed session from council.
So I would entertain council's direction. The issue is whether we have the closed session this evening or whether it's deferred for until our next council meeting. Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Would we need a motion for this?
When we get into council, we can into council when we get, sorry.
Then through you, Mayor, I would support whatever is procedurally required in order to move the closed meeting agenda item onto a different evening.
We can take that recommendation to council where we would have that motion and discussion. Yes, Councillor Stewart.
Just to try to preserve the evening and everything through you, Mayor, maybe what we need to do, because I know that I want to talk about some of these reports and everything. Maybe we go through them and defer them till next council meeting so we can go through them fairly quickly and then get right into closed. So, you know, there's probably about 3 or 4 reports I like to pull. Instead of talking about them, we just could defer them. Would that be correct, Jennifer?
I think you're going to want to, through you, when we look at a consent agenda, you're going to want to pull those items and say you want them brought back to another meeting, would be how you would do it.
Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, if you're taking opinions, I would like to defer things here. It's almost 8 o'clock and whether or not the council continues on, I will have to have a hard out. So I'm also using this under the procedure law to let you know that unfortunately, I will have to leave the meeting at 8 o'clock.
Thank you. Councillor Stanoff Gray, please.
I also would like to have a hard stop of 8 o'clock today, just because I am away on vacation with my family and I've stepped away to do the meetings. So I'd prefer to get back to them.
Okay, so it sounds as though at this point, we are going to identify any reports that we would like to withdraw. We will go to council, then we will have the motion as presented by one of the council members, whether to continue or not continue, which is the right procedural place to have that motion and decision. So at this point, we're in the consent agenda. And I'm going to the consent agenda items are available for your consideration. We'll go around the table if there are any that you would like to have referred to the next council meeting. You can identify them, but we will not be having extended discussion on any of them. Deputy Mayor Clark, are there any items that you would like to put on next council meeting agenda?
No.
Councillor Blackwell.
Through you, no, I just do really want to express my appreciation for the quarterly updates. I really feel like it gives us a great sense of what's going on, and kind of as Councillor Stewart said, with the
Are
scope
there
of
any
work.
items that you would like to put on the agenda? Okay, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, 8.2D. And so 8.2D, and the other one for sure I want to put down is under report 7D. Or sorry, 7A. Under communications, sorry, it's 8.4A. County of Bruce Correspondence Development Charge Study.
Councillor Prenger.
No, thank you.
Councillor Hinchberger.
There are 2, and I provided them to clerk previously. 8.2 Bravo, Corporate Services Quarterly Update. It's related to the 2 lost time incidents. And 8.4 Bravo, the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority 2023 Watershed Report Card.
Perfect.
And my item would be 8.4 Golly. Golf.
Golly.
For G. Sorry. All right, the motion to adjourn committee of the whole.
Can I add my consent items to be pulled before we adjourn?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Stanoff Gray, my apologies.
That's okay. I wanted to pull 8.4 Delta, as well as 8.4 Foxtrot. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Councillor Kavanaugh, any for you?
Nothing. Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn committee of the whole, please.
Moved by Beth Blackwell, seconded by Bill Stewart, that this committee of the whole adjourn at 7:56 PM.
All in favor? That's carried. Number 10, matters arising from committee of the whole. 10.1, consideration. Council approved the recommendations contained in the consent agenda dated April 3, 2023. Direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. Moved by
Bill Stewart and seconded by Jennifer Prenger. That's except for all the ones that you listed in committee of the whole.
all in favor? That's carried. 8.2, year-end capital transfers that council authorized the reserve and reserve fund transfers totaling 336,205 as summarized in the attached 2022 summary of reserve and reserve fund transfer schedule. Moved by
That's Mike Hinchberger and Andrea Clark.
I've heard the resolution. Any discussion? All in favor? Yes. That's carried. Asset retirement obligations, that the asset retirement obligation policy bylaw be deemed to be read first, second, third time. Finally passed, numbered as bylaw 2023-47. Moved by
Rory Kavanaugh, seconded by Amanda Steinhoff Gray.
that was carried. OPP enforcement bylaw agreement 2023 bylaw be deemed to be read first, second, third time. Finally passed and numbered as bylaw 2023-048. Moved by
Bill Stewart, seconded by Beth Blackwell.
any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Any other motions that would like to be offered to council at this time?
Sorry,
Are there any motions that would like to be offered?
like of the 759, right?
No.
You want me to motion?
If you would like to.
Hold on, I was trying to multitask there and didn't do it well. I would. Do you want me to attempt this?
First off, we'd like to extend the meeting till sometime because we have 1 minute and then we automatically have to quit.
I motion that we extend till no later than 8:15 PM.
Moved by Mike, seconded by Councillor Blackwell. All in favor? That's carried.
Right, would you repeat the ask, please?
Would you like to defer the Westario meeting till the next meeting?
I would like to move that agenda item 13, the closed meeting, be deferred until the next earliest opportunity.
Moved by Councillor Hinchberger, seconded by Deputy Mayor Clark. Is there any discussion? All in favor of deferral? And that is carried. Member of Council, general announcements. Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you. Through you, I will keep this short. Yesterday was World Autism Awareness Day for all those folks in our community who are neurodivergent. And also April is organ and tissue donation month. I encourage, if you have not, to consider visit Be a Donor. I personally have benefited from blood donation, but I know that organ donation and tissue donation are genuinely life-saving opportunities. So encourage you to look into that.
Counselor Stewart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I just wanted to thank one of the staff members, and Jill, I hope you pass this on to Jessica. She did an outstanding job on the tall tree sale program on Saturday. Her and her son were there. We sold a lot of trees. We had some problems, some issues, but she handled it extremely well. And there's still some trees left. She told me at 4 o'clock, there's 13 honey locusts, 8 blue spruce, and 11 white pines still left, but the program was very successful and she deserves a lot of credit. So pass that on. Thank you.
Counselor Pranger,
I have nothing this week. Thank you.
Counselor Hinchberger.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. One item. This one might not be aware to a lot of people right now. There's a municipal class environmental assessment being done to look at the expansion of the Kincardine water system and water treatment plant. Currently, we're in a novel virtual public information center that's being held online through the municipality's YouTube channel. It began on the 30th of March. It ends on the 28th of April. So I encourage everybody who has an interest in this to go online, watch the video. It was very informative, and to provide comment. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Clark.
Saturday, April the 8th will be Kincardine Agricultural Annual Easter Egg Hunt at 10 a.m. at the Huron Heights Public School.
Counselor Steinhoff Gray.
Thank you. I just wanted to reference a couple things that I thought were important. And Beth, thank you for that nod to organ donation. I too had a blood donation, and I'm on the bone marrow registry, which is an amazing service. If you can get registered for it, whenever you have a match, they'll call you. So I think it's an important thing to do. But I just wanted to give credit to the Huron Fringe Nationalist Rally on the 15th of April. Obviously in voice of what's happening with Bill 23. And I also wanted to call out the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility, the call for nominations, Ontario for Seniors of the Year. We have a lot of seniors that give back to our community, whether at the hospitals, acting as greeters. I know that's not exclusive to seniors, but I see how active our seniors are in our community. And I think it's important that we put nominations forward for the submission. Thank you.
And Counselor Kavanaugh is offline or just off camera? Okay. Just a comment, our CIO and myself met with Saugeen Shores mayor and staff today regarding the start of our cooperative physician recruiter plan that council authorized. The broad framework was discussed, and the staff will be bringing a report back sometime in the future. There's a significant amount of thinking through what this looks like. It's not so much the the people that are involved. People is an important part of it, but just identifying what the broad plan for physician recruitment, well, not even just physician, it's the medical professional recruitment, because now it's happening in the field of nurses and PSWs and nurse practitioners, all sorts of areas. So they'll be bringing a report back in sometime in the future. Here we are. Don't even know where I am anymore. Oh, CAO announcements. Confirmatory bylaw, clerk, please.
Moved by Mike Hinchberger, seconded by Andrea Clark. And this is the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of this council meeting. And it'll be bylaw 2023-049.
Motion to adjourn.
This is moved by, choose somebody, 2 other people, since those 2 people are gone. Moved by Andrea Clark and seconded by Beth Blackwell, that this council adjourn at 8:05 p.m.
All in favor? Yes.